I'm shocked as many people like it as they do, because I was
Right.
expecting a lot of people not to, especially for the religion stuff, especially for the vampire stuff. Like, that's not black folks. We don't mess with religion. We don't mess with demons and monsters and stuff.
Yeah.
Black people do, but the majority don't. We don't
Right.
fool with it. So for it to be like so many people just digging it, I'm like, whoa,
Yeah.
I wasn't expecting it at all. So
We've been gone a long time. We back now. You twins? Nah, we cousins.
There are legends of people with the gift of making music so true. It can conjure spirits from the past and the future. This gift can bring fame and fortune.
Will somebody take me in your arms?
But it also can pierce the veil between life and death.
Listen here, this ain't no house party. Shit. Y'all ready to drink? Y'all ready to sweat till y'all stink?
You want some?
You keep dancing with the devil.
Careful, boy. You gonna bite off more than you can chew.
One day he's gonna follow you home.
this is Jay. I'm back in for another one, and today I have with me.
Sabrina.
How you doing, Sabrina?
Doing very well. Very
Good.
well.
Good to see you. So this is almost like a take two, round two of our conversation. And it's funny. I feel like I'm blessed that, like, when I'm watching something, and like when I was watching this movie for the first time, immediately I thought of a few people that I wanted to have a discussion with. And you definitely was one of them. We have great conversations, especially with like quote unquote black movies or black subject matter movies. And I always love what you bring to the conversation. But I love that when I see something, I know exactly already who I want to speak to about it, and that I could call them folks and actually have that conversation. And even though it might be about a particular subject matter or movie or music or whatever, that they're all different and special because of what the person adds to it. And that's just like with any kind of art, always going to be different in somebody else's hands. So that's the art part of conversation and people's take on things. It's like painting with different brushes or different mediums.
Well, I am honored to be in the vicinity of all of this, to be able to, come back from time to time and have these fruitful discussions about film that lead into other discussions, right? There are
Right.
always different avenues beyond film. We've had conversations about various different things, but the funny thing is you almost didn't get me on this film because it's horror. So, you know what I mean?
Right.
If there was any other actor in it, I'd have been like, yeah, I couldn't do it, couldn't do it.
Yeah.
So, he definitely knew what he was doing. He knows what he's doing. I'm talking about the director.
Yeah.
He obviously knows what he's doing when he makes these films, but like Michael B. Jordan, you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
okay, I guess I'll sacrifice, I'll go,
Yeah. I know that on the surface, sometimes, and almost like the blackening, you think it's going to be this slasher movie, which it is, but it was more to it than just that. And so you're open to look past that and be like, okay, if I'm not just going into strictly this kind of thing, then maybe you'll say yes to bypass the outside of it for what's
Mhm.
inside of it. So I appreciate that, because I know like on surface it'd be like, yeah, I wouldn't touch that.
Right.
With certain kind of movies, I definitely try to be cautious or see if it's worth bothering you about, because I wouldn't want to have to put you through anything that you don't want to sit through. Because I get it, because some stuff you just don't want in your head.
Yeah, I think I'm open to, because of that, that film background and all of that kind of stuff. I'm not really into like sci-fi. You know what I mean? Like Star Wars is my jam and Star Trek, but
Hmm.
I've never really gone any deeper than those two. And Star Wars, because I'm old enough to say that I saw the original.
Yeah,
You know what I mean? So
yeah.
anything that comes after that is like, okay, what happened next?
Hmm.
With Star Wars and Star Trek, because it was on TV all the time and it
Yeah,
was great. So I'm sure there's other things out there that are just as good as those two, but
yeah,
those are the ones that I'm used to. So,
yeah. No, that's
mhm.
fair. That's fair. I think that this movie is just very special. And I think I realized that more so on multiple watches, just how special it was. Because, like I said, you're kind of working through a lot. You're working through, the history of the director. You're working with the history of the genre. the built-in filters that we have, we're trying to work through those. And sometimes it takes a couple siftings to see it for what it is, to get the taste of it. And so sometimes it's just like, okay, I took the initial experience, and now that I'm trying it again, I can really taste the flavors and the nuances. And also with Ryan Coogler being from the Bay, being from Oakland, and him having a beautiful vision and perspective on things. And the people he surrounds himself with lends to that perspective. And him being open to their perspectives as well, it makes for a different product in a way. I hate to call it a product, but it's a product because in a movie that's being shown everywhere. And so I was kind of in just from the beginning, just because it was coming from him.
Mm-hmm.
And then also I like the actors and everything too, but it's just kind of like I like his brand. And even though he's relatively a new writer director, I think it's his fifth movie, he has a distinct brand that I love and I'm down with. And so with that and with the whole thing too, with him filming on actual film, 70 millimeter film and an IMAX and all that other kind of stuff, just all these little things that he's just showing like, hey, he appreciate his craft and what it means to him. Like I'm an artist, and we start thinking about how important art is and ideas are. Do you want the medium to support the art that you're making? So you kind of want it on the best things possible. And so that's how I kind of took it when he was talking about putting on film and being presented in certain kind of ways and stuff. And then we were lucky enough to have like one of five in a certain format that actually playing in the Bay Area that we could actually go to and see the Grand Lake Theater. And so seeing those formats I felt was really important. And if I could see a movie like Quentin Tarantino's Hateful Eight in that format, and I saw it at the Grand Lake as well, and I also saw Oppenheimer in a film format. I'm like, I can't do no less than do the same for his project.
Mm-hmm.
So I just like the experience of hearing the projector in the background, even so slight, or the little imperfections on the screen. It's just a warmer visual feeling. It's like a CD compared to an album on a record player. It's just that contact just takes it to another level. And it's just a little nuances that really adds to it. But I love how he's preserving this art in a special way. Like this is not something that could be deleted or whatever. It's on actual film. It's tactile. And I think that's a beautiful way to have a piece of art. Even before the movie came out, you saw his care and the things that he was doing to protect it, even before anybody had an opinion on it. Like, I love this thing. This thing is important to me. It says so much. So when I saw all that care he was putting into it, ain't no way I wasn't going to see it in the way he wanted me to see it or the best way it could be presented.
So for me, initially saw it, it was just like, get it done. I mean, I wasn't thinking in the sense of going to a different theater as much as it was like around the corner from me. And so I did see it again, and I saw it at the Grand Lake, which was grand. I
Right.
mean, we could talk about that theater just in itself, just walking into that space, and it just takes you to a different universe,
Yeah.
being in there, and it takes you back in time and all of those things. And so, again, like you said, seeing the projector back there, the old window that I kind of used to see when I was going to the movies when I was young. I took pictures of that. I kind of spent some extra time at the theater after the movie was over, just walking around, like taking a little tour of the Grand Lake. I had been there probably once or twice before. I think I
Okay.
had attended a film festival there a couple of
Okay.
years ago, many years ago, actually. And then I saw Spike Lee there for, I think it was Bamboozled. He was
Oh,
actually,
wow.
yeah, he was actually there. Were you there when he
No,
did
I
his? Okay.
wish I saw Bamboozled actually in Berkeley at one of the theaters that's no longer there.
Okay.
But I would have loved to had experienced that with him. We haven't talked about that movie. We've mentioned that movie before, but we haven't had a deep discussion about that movie, which we'll have to do one day for sure. But that's a classic.
Yeah, we could definitely do that movie. There's a lot of a lot of levels to kind of unpack on that film in particular.
Right.
Initially, I think we have to kind of talk about the fact that, like, sometimes when we hear about films from other people, and we hear about it a lot, I always go on opening weekend no
Yeah.
matter what. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? I think I started to see some things online about how great it was. And then I got a text from my daughter that was, you got to go see this movie, which she knew I was going to see. She was extremely enthusiastic about it. So my son and I went, we saw it. And I'm going to be honest, like, you and I text, and I was like,
Yeah.
And you were like, what? And I was like,
Like, what do you mean, man?
right. And I couldn't put my finger on why. And then I was like, ooh, my blackness. You know what I mean? Like, is
Yeah,
my
no,
card gonna be taken?
right, right, right,
Like we
no.
gotta be honest about this stuff, right?
That's
Because
true.
we
That's
could just
true.
sit here and just say it was so
Hey,
great, it was lovely and all of
hey.
that. But it was like, I had to really kind of like just like because
My heart was a little hurt though. I wasn't gonna judge you or nothing. You notice how I didn't even push back. I was just like, meh. Like, meh? Like, what do you mean, meh? Like, I was trying to save the situation. I'm like, meh, like a scene, or meh, like the whole movie? What do you mean, meh? I'm taking meh as the whole movie, so I'm trying to figure out if it's like a certain part that we could discuss, maybe, or I don't know. But it was funny. I was like, oh goodness. I know she said meh, and I'm just like, oh. Like I said, it just made me curious. It just made me curious. I didn't, hey, no card be
no
taken.
judging, right?
I still think that, no, you know your stuff and you have your perspective. And I love that. I love that about you. So it wasn't nothing like that, but it did make me like, I really want to have a conversation just because I'm curious and not to, go against anything because how you feel is how you feel. It's a personal thing. Movies and stuff like that, music, there are relationships. And so sometimes it could remind you of an ex, or it could just like you don't like that flavor. It could be anything, or it's just like the wrong day to be seeing it. Like I can't
Right,
see certain movies or hear certain songs on certain days because it just won't go down right. And so that's fair.
right.
But I know that you're not just like meh about anything. And if you are, what they do to you? Who hurt you? Who did that to you? Who did
Who
that to you?
hit you in the theater? Who gave you the wrong
Right? Who
popcorn?
sat next to you and was
Who gave you
talking?
a Coke instead of a Pepsi,
Right,
right?
right, 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 right. Who messed with you? Who's messing with Sabrina? I know
Right.
that's not
Who sent
because
my
you don't.
$1 million check to the wrong box?
Right. Oh, you went there. I love that line.
Right,
I
right.
love that line because it could feel that heavy sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
Who put
Mm-hmm.
your $1 million check in somebody else's box?
So for me, I didn't know what the man kind of was in a sense. I just walked out feeling something that I could not describe in that moment. And I was with my son at the time,
Yeah.
And so I just walked out with like it was maybe when I think about it, it was just so overwhelming. You know what I mean? That it was like so much stuff going on. Plus it was like a horror film, plus I closed my eyes a couple of times.
Oh, okay.
Plus, I did not like at the time how it ended. And that's what I
Okay.
said to you later on.
Yeah.
When I digested the whole thing, it was the ending. I think I felt kind of robbed at the end, like, what?
Huh.
Come in. Just come in after all of that. It's just a come in. You know what I mean? And I truly think that was the part that got me feeling, kind of like as we say in our feelings at the end, like, but
Huh.
but they had other things to do. There was more to it than that. It just felt like giving up at the end. Not just the characters, it just felt like the film gave up at the end because it was just like, okay, come in and we're all going to pretty much die. You know what I mean? Because when they came in, I just believed everybody was going to die. I didn't think anybody was going to survive that. It was too
Wait.
many people,
When you
too many
say
vampires.
okay, so you're talking about the part with Grace.
Yes.
When Grace
Right.
screamed, just come in, mother effer.
Yeah, exactly.
That's all he needed to hear. I'm like, oh, I'll oblige. Yeah, I get that.
So to be clear, it was not the entire film. So I don't get my car taken away. It wasn't
No,
it
it's not
wasn't
like
the
that.
entire film. It was that feeling at the end of giving up, of just like I
Yeah,
feel like more could have been done. I mean, but
yeah,
that was something that I had to really just kind of sit with and then it was just so much put into that film and so much responsibility on his part to be
right,
true and authentic and
right,
genuine about it, right? So
right,
it's definitely a film that you have to watch more than once because
for
he
sure.
layered it that way.
Right,
I don't believe that film was made for you to see once and be like, it was great. You know what I
right.
mean?
Yeah, I agree, and I had similar kind of feelings in a way about certain parts of it, but it, like I said, it was multiple things going on, so it's almost kind of like, something's got to happen with the genre anyway. It's almost like a romantic comedy, right? Like even though you like their relationship, you know they're gonna have to break up. And you're like, oh, here's that part. Like it was going so good. Now they gotta break up and have a misunderstanding, and then they're gonna get back together at the end. You're like, man, why did this have to happen? Like I said, you just appreciate the relationship. So when it does get to that part where it goes bad, you're kind of like, okay, here we go with this part. So it's just like one of those kind of things that come along with that. And it's like not like the part you're looking forward to, but certain things you got to have in a movie. And I also, when I first saw the movie, I definitely wasn't meh, but it was like I was trying to process what I chewed. It was like it was just so much. It was so much. And I think what the saving grace for me was the fact that there was so many standout parts about it that the part that I was still kind of like trying to take in, it kind of offset it for me. So if it didn't have some big moments in it, I probably would have been like, huh, I didn't expect that it would go down like that, or it was really kind of like how this was. And so with that second viewing, I also kind of had a different appreciation for it. And the more I watched them, like, wow. But sometimes it can be just a lot at one time, and it just you can't digest it all at the same time. It's just a lot. And if it was just a straightforward movie that didn't include vampires or something like that, then it probably would have been went down differently versus like, oh, certain things have to be in there because it is this genre as well. It's like you want to, like I said, a romantic comedy, and then it has some explosion and action, and you're like, wait a minute, where did that come from? It was like the action explosion was cool, but I
Right.
just kind of wanted to hear the nice talking and the walks in the park. I wasn't expecting the building to blow up, and so it was almost probably guilty of just doing too good at the different parts. And so when they started kind of colliding, speaking of that, like even with that scene with Sammy performing, that I lied to you, he performed at the juke joint, and that whole thing with the music changing and all those different elements coming in. If it was in any other movie with any other director, when you saw that guy playing electric guitar, like from the futuristic, almost like a Parliament Funkadelic guy playing electric guitar right next to him, it's like, what is that? Like, it did kind of snap me, like, wait, what is this? Like, did they jump the shark with showing
Mm-hmm.
that contrast that deep? Like, okay, I accept it's a vampire movie. I accept that it's a period piece. I accept those things, but like, what is he doing? Almost like somebody walking in the set and they're wearing the wrong clothes or something. Like, wait a minute, that throws off everything. That takes away the magic. But I didn't know I was in the middle of the magic, and that and I just need to sit back and just like, okay, and which I did. I'm kind of like, okay, let me hear this out. And I started seeing the different interpretations from different times. I'm like, whoa, bring more, bring more. Seeing that by the time I saw the girls twerking in the kitchen and then the guys crip walking, I was already ready because I already got past the guy playing electric guitar where he wasn't supposed to be and the turntables and stuff. So all that stuff started coming in. I'm like, okay, he's feeding me these slow bites, but it is kind of counter to the narrative to what we're seeing, even though it's exactly the narrative of saying how music passes through space and time and how it's all connected and almost like it's almost always there around us. And depending on where we are, we pull from it, but we are all here at once. Like time is a construct that we see being in these bodies and stuff, but the truth is always all around us all at once. And I think that's a beautiful concept. And for him to visually display it in that way, I have never seen it done like that before. It took my breath away. And even though I was confused and kind of stumped when I first saw it, it brought me to tears by the end of it, seeing how powerful that was. And also feeling kind of sad and how true it is to life, how the vampire was the one who had that perspective of seeing all that kind of stuff. And the people actually doing the stuff and enjoying the music and being in that moment is not seeing the ancestors and not seeing the future and not seeing the past or anything like that. They're just in that moment. And the vampire, who is quote unquote, I guess the bad guy or waiting to take it, sees it for what it is and how we walk around a lot of times not knowing who we are and how powerful it is and what it could possibly mean. And for us to kind of deal with it in a way where we're not understanding what we have, and it's just not being aware of what you hold and how on the outside is others who see it for what it really is and just us walking around not knowing who we are. It just made me just like, yeah, we're walking around like them, not knowing who we are. The vampires chomping at the bit, waiting for their opportunity to take that from us. And we don't even know to protect it because we're just dancing to it. we're not seeing the story or the translation of ideas or the perspectives or the possibilities that's within it. It's like, but that's how people treat blues, you know? And I don't know how true, but they say like black people don't really fool with blues, but others really embrace it and cherish it. And a lot of times our folks got to go overseas to be appreciated because we done moved on to something else. So speaking to a lot of things that we're currently experiencing, and it was just summed up beautifully in that moment and that whole scene. It was just wonderful.
So if I go back a little bit to what we were talking about, 3 points I want to keep in mind that I was thinking of as you were talking about it. One, in the sense of when we were talking about how that was received on my part and how I thought of it initially, it was because I kind of brought into the hype of everybody else. You know what I mean? Everybody else's energy was like in my head before I walked in that movie. You know what I mean? So it's kind of like what you said. You're expecting this big thing because everybody else has experienced that. And it takes away from who I am as an experienced person who's made some films and, none that are in theaters, none that you could run to the theater for.
I'm sure they're beautiful works.
That's true. And being, a film goer, is that my experience is going to be different, not than everybody else's, but it's going to be different than the person that's sitting next to me and the person that's next to them. And so I think if I went in with that mindset of being like, well, let me experience this for myself. Let me not buy into, the hype of what I'm seeing online and what everybody's telling me and just experience it for myself.
Right.
I don't know if it would have been a completely different outcome, but that's what I went in there with. Like, everybody says this is great, so let me, watch it from that perspective. When you were talking about the part about the music, there has been films, and I can't think of any of them at this time, but I think Jay-Z did, where it was a film, it was like a period piece. And some of his music, it was made for that film, but it was like modernized hip hop in that film. And that's what I thought when I first saw that scene happen, that music scene happen. I was like, are we doing that?
I know that happened in Django. Was it? I think it was the RZA. Was it Wu-Tang Clan? It was one of those kind of songs where they
Probably,
had that
yeah.
updated modern and Jamie Foxx shooting slave masters and stuff like that, and
Yes.
he's taking them out.
It's been done. It's, that's a great example. It's been done. It's been done in, I can't think of another one, but
He felt it was the same as that?
no, when it first started and I
Oh.
saw this other energy kind of coming in, or, like, what is this? Like, I was focused on that one thing and then something else came in and I thought it was going to be like that. But then it was like you said, once I saw it was like equal opportunity, all of these different things was coming. It made you focus your lens all around the space of that place.
Yeah.
You were looking in corners, like, what's next? What's next? And that was the genius of what he did. You know what I mean? So, like, when I think of the film and I think of it in that sense, I think he really just had so many hats on when he was making his film. And as I mentioned before, so much responsibility, to make sure that, especially in these times,
Right.
that he was responsible to, his people in that sense, and responsible to people who are open-minded to learning about our history, right? Because this is history that's being erased.
Right.
So you want to make sure that if you're making a film like this, that you're putting in history that's accurate and factual, even though the facts are being erased, but you can't erase this film, right?
Right.
And for him to cement it by like, it's mine. I'm gonna give you 25 years to hold it.
Yeah.
You borrow it for 25 years, but this belongs to my family.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
Right.
Like, nobody's coming in here. This is not a government federal thing. No one's coming in here taking away my film, right?
Right.
It was just genius work, all around. And when we talk about the blues, I have a classmate, who I was talking to a couple of years ago, and we were talking about, music genres. And, he mentioned blues was one of his favorite ones. And I was like, how old are you? You know what I mean? Like, I immediately was like, but then I thought about it, and it's the same thing that, Ryan Coogler said. His uncle was playing that.
Right.
So it's about, the storytelling that comes from within your family and how you receive those things within your family. He has opened up a whole new avenue of blues aficionados now. You know what I mean?
Right.
People are going to start playing the blues because they want to remember that film. You know, that music was great, but it wasn't enough. We need more.
Right.
He started that with this film. And, you know, I think like for me, you know, looking at every morsel of it, every part of it, like, okay, what did he do here? Not analyzing it necessarily while it was going on, but just really paying attention to all of those things.
Mm-hmm.
And then, like I said, at the end, what? You know what I mean?
Right.
Wait a minute, you know, like there's this building and then like she just says, come in. And, you know, so many people, I think one of the things that I really did like about this film afterwards, like it's like an after party.
Yeah, yeah.
It's really like there was an after party that people put together about this film, right?
Right.
You leave the film and then everybody's like, no, we're not done. We're not
Right.
done. Let's go over here down the hall, turn on the lights,
Right.
and let's talk about this thing, right?
Right.
So to see everybody so engaged in their thoughts about, you know, Grace at the end saying, come in, they were like, oh yeah, here we go. She was never part of the society. She was just kind of like there ciphering off, you know, the community. And in the end, she's not supporting us. And then there's the other half, like she did have a kid.
Right.
You know what I mean? And so like it depends on what communities you kind of belong to. If you are a parent, then you get it. Like,
right.
Of course he did that because she's like, I don't know what's gonna happen to me, but I'm gonna die on this hill. I'm gonna die trying.
Right, right. And she's almost kind of like the girlfriend that got kind of pulled into her husband's best friend's mess. And plenty of times you don't heard like, hey, you know, don't hang out around him because he's trouble. You could tell that he was more down with the brothers than she was, you know what I mean? And she was just kind of there. And then sometimes it'd be situations where we might say, hey, it's none of your business, stay out of it. Mm-hmm. So her saying for herself that this is not our trouble, to me, that'd be equivalent to, you know, me and my lady was with another couple and they're getting into it. My lady might be like, hey, let's support her. And I would be kind of like, hey, that's none of our business. That's their business. They invited over to their house. They got into it. I don't feel like it's our place to get in the middle of it because many times it goes where you going to step in to kind of take a side of somebody, something happens or whatever, and then you're mad at the person, you go about your life and you go back to see how they're doing, and everybody's chummy and they're mad at you because you said something. It's just like, so to me, when I saw that, I'm like, yeah, a lot of times, yeah, that's none of your business. You could have been there for the party, but not for the argument part. You might be here for this part, but not that part. And then some are just going to be down for it. Like, we're all going down together. So it's just different types of folks. And like I said, if it wasn't from Grace, it would be happening from somebody else. It just would have had to happen. And that's where the genre of the movie comes in, where it's a vampire movie where the vampires have to get in, or is it going to be a stalemate? Okay, we'll wait them out. Okay. 2 years later, 2 years later, they're there and new generations. Remember when mom and dad first got stuck in this place and we never had to leave because the vampires still waiting outside? It'd never be over. You know, or some weird thing.
Part two, the waiting.
Yeah, or the eclipse comes and the sun never comes out. So they stuck there forever. Right. It's like, it could be, come on, like some of this. So I don't think that the connection of the two cultures and stuff, I don't feel like it was necessarily disrupted because of Grace doing that. I felt it was just a situation and it was going to have to happen. And regardless of the, you know, the kid part, which makes sense to me or not, or she just feeling like, hey, we didn't come for all this stuff. Because you could tell she already had an issue with people getting hurt or shot or whatever when they first met them at the store and it's all like, hey, I saw two guys shot in the middle of the street. Like, what's up with that? And then also her feeling like, hey, you're so quick to shoot these guys for looking in your truck. They didn't get a chance to even steal. But even how it would look if you walked away and had that story and didn't have a limp, that you would be so quick to do that instantly. But they're doing this to your brother, my man, and potentially my child. And you're sitting here like, what? Oh, keep the same energy. Like, that could be a perspective that would be expected, and being like, if y'all ain't down, then, you know, because she just went out there herself and then took the situation on herself, she could have it could have happened so many different ways. But
well, I think that like that's a valid point to bring up, but I think it was the tone with her and her delivery, you know, where she was like not, you know, she wasn't invested vocally after the husband went out as much as she was at the end of the film. And I understand the placement of it because it was getting, you know, to the point where he was like, hey, I'm going to go to town and I'm mess with your kid. And I know everything about you. So that's what brought her. That was the buy-in for her. Like, oh, shoot. Oh, you talking to me? This isn't just about all of us. Now you getting real personal with it. I do understand that drive with her. But I think it took away from us looking at him as it wasn't really him that we were looking at as the person to do something. Right. So when she was like, do something, I'm like, everybody's doing something. There was no main hero when it came down to that list of people in that space. You know what I mean? Everybody was like participating in some part. And when she put the onus on him and was being demanding about it in that sense of like what you just said, well, you did this, and this. These are vampires. You know what I'm saying? These are vampires. There's the one person who's maybe an expert in this is Annie, and she's doing the best that she can. Right. Are you not paying attention to what Annie has been telling us from day? I'm saying day one in the sense of when she stood at that door and was like, your big ass could have came in here a long time ago. You know what I mean? Like, right. And I love the fact that everybody was like, listen to her. Yeah. Nobody disputed it. Mm-hmm. So to me, I'm not going to say that she was the heroine of the story. I'm saying everybody played a part. Right. And then for Grace to turn around and say, why aren't you doing something? You have the most experience because you're a soldier, you're a vet. These are vampires. Like, right. I'm trying to figure it out, but these are vampires. But
if you're the one that's happening to, it's like the police saying, hey, we're doing an investigation. You don't want to hear that. Even though that's the process that it takes to take your time to figure out, you're still kind of like, really? If that was one of your boys in blue that got taken out, would you still be telling them to wait? I think it's the same kind of energy, but I understand why the folks in there were kind of like, let's think this out versus her kind of being like, I don't have time to wait. Mm-hmm. And I don't understand why this is, like I said, you're not really listening for stuff to make sense or understanding or process when you're under the fire. And it's going to be a different kind of priority. Because it could have been a black person with a kid out there. They said that too. And they might have moved different. If not Annie, it would have been one of the other people up in there. Possibly. Almost surprised Smoke didn't do it. But he almost did when he was at the door. He almost kind of started drifting towards that door. And they had to kind of grab him back too. Yeah, now he wasn't inviting them in, but he was going to go and join them.
Yeah, so, they grabbed Sammy back too because he was heading out.
Exactly. So everybody was going to kind of make a decision, and not justifying, like I said, because it made a bigger mess. That was a mess that was already big. But I understand, like, if it was kind of a thing that you went there to serve drinks and then it turned into this murder case, yeah, you might be ready to go. Honey, get your stuff. Let's go. We came to support Jimmy and his bar, but I didn't need to be suspect or witness number 5.
Right.
Let's go, honey. Let's go. And that could be your kid. Hey, let's go. Or it could be your husband. Hey, let's go. Or it could be your wife. Hey, let's go. Mm-hmm. Let's leave while the getting's good. I smell smoke. Guess what's coming next? Mm-hmm. So.
I think a different perspective on it too for me is kind of like what you had mentioned before. You said something about, what if it wasn't about vampires and it was like, like a love story, you would be expecting like these things. And so I thought about conversations that we've had in the past where like slave narratives are my jam, you know what I mean? And you're like, not going to get me, not going to do it. And then we've also spoken about these period pieces where people get tired of being downtrodden and all of that. Yeah. So like, I think it married two things for two different audiences. For me, I didn't know it was going to have all of these beautiful layers, of things that I really love and things that I'm passionate about and talk to people about all the time, which is Black history. You know what I'm saying? Like, I just thought they were making Black history by making this film. So like, I was engrossed in all of that stuff. And then the vampire stuff, the funny thing about it is I have my eyes closed, sometimes because it's not my thing. You know what I mean? So the funny part about that I shared was that when people were talking about Mary and Stack were watching when Annie got bit and was getting ready to transition. Right. And they, her and Smoke had that agreement of what they were going to do. And she said, you promise. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like, you got to do this. Like, look, we've done all we can. Now we got to take care of ourselves.
Right.
And when Mary and Stack reacted to it, and I saw all of this stuff, and all these analyzing of how they felt it. I was like, when did that happen? And I said to
What?
my son, like, people are talking about this thing, and like, I don't remember seeing that. He was like, yeah, mom, it happened. And I was
Yeah.
like, oh, that's when I had my eyes closed.
Yeah. I
It was
thought it was so
because of the
powerful.
gore and the blood, and I'm not
Oh,
into the horror films, so I had my
yeah.
eyes closed. And they were like, yeah, Mary ran out in the woods. And I was like, when did I? And it was in
Oh,
those seconds
yeah, yeah,
that I
yeah.
blinked that they were gone.
Yeah.
So speaking to that is just speaking about how it was two different films
Yeah.
married together, and
Yeah.
how it works for everybody. It worked for
Right.
you because of the aspect of it being a horror film, and you were fine with that. You know what I mean?
Yeah. But not only that, but okay. So on that particular scene, I thought it was so powerful. And it shocked me at first when I saw that Mary screamed when Annie got it, right?
Right.
When Smoke took her out. And it was just like, she screamed, and then Stack was almost kind of, let's go, let's go. Almost kind of like the plan didn't work out. And it was funny because it was almost twofold, because I honestly believe they wanted her to join them, to be with them so they could be together. Because she
Right.
really truly thought of as Annie as family,
Right.
right? Not just like the evil vampire wants her, because he wants her too, right? But
Mhm.
it felt like, like, oh, she's really dead. Like, she's really not going to come back. So that really kind of touched me, that they were touched by that. And even how she
Mhm.
was screaming to that Stack was the one that was biting her. She was like, not you, not you. And I thought of it almost like what your brother must be thinking to see that, because I wouldn't want your brother to hate you or feel a
Mhm.
way about you because you killed me. That kind of, it just seemed like there was just a whole bunch of stuff going on. But I
Mhm.
thought it was beautiful that she asked, and I didn't really realize until after watching it a second time, that the reason why she wanted one reason why she wanted Smoke to take her out, when she was doing her hoodoo stuff, and she was like reading the signs and stuff, that she knew she was going to be gone, and she wanted to be with her baby. And she was fine with that, right? She knew she
Right.
was going to be gone, and the only way she could see her baby is not to be trapped in that body as a
Mhm.
vampire, but to go. But then also, she probably also knew that it'd been dangerous for Remick to possess her, because then
Right.
he would have the ability that she has, the insight that she has.
Right.
That would add to his collective, and she didn't
Mhm.
want him to be able to use that against everybody too. So it was on so many levels that all this stuff was happening. And so a simple reaction from a character who got turned could be from knowing that it's really going to be over with that person and they were never going to see their friend again, to I can't let this vampire have access to my essence, to my soul, to my knowledge, and all this other kind of stuff. And so it was just powerful on so many levels. But what you're saying, which is true, I don't like these slave narrative movies and stuff. It was interesting because this is the first time I can remember seeing a movie in this way. And it's funny because my sister, she brought up Color Purple, which is true, but I'm not really a fan of the movie Color Purple, but I understand where she's going from. But for a movie that I saw that I enjoyed, I don't really remember seeing and enjoying a movie where I saw fields of cotton and people working in the cotton fields and stuff like that, not necessarily being slaves, not
Right.
necessarily having whips, blood on the cotton, slave masters and all, and broken people. Like, it tripped me out to see them going to go see Cornbread working in the field with his family. Like, he's not a slave. Like, I knew he wasn't a slave, but even to see it like that on a screen, where even though it's a job that's still technically slavery in a
I
way,
was gonna say that. Yeah.
but it still didn't have all the other stuff in there that I don't like. It didn't have the overseer on the horse in the background with him picking that cotton. It didn't
Mhm.
have, like I said, the whip or the blood or the threat or the broken man kind of thing. You know what I mean? Like, they wasn't broken. They still had self. They still worked out some kind of humility. They still were people. And I like to see just the people doing their thing. It wasn't the best of circumstances, but they wasn't broken people. It was just beautiful to see, and to see cotton and feels that way and that kind of work and labor that way without it having the extra oomph on it. The extra oomph, I understand. That's the history. I understand. But then even in those situations, it's almost like you're less of a person being in them without showing that you are still, they don't show humanity. And I think that's why I don't like seeing us like that when I know we're more than that. And so to see this and see the same kind of environment without that stank on it was refreshing. And it took me a minute to even accept what I was seeing, because I'm so triggered to seeing, if I see this, I'm going to see that. If I see that, I'm going to see this. And if this is happening, that means that's going to happen. So having people having pride, dignity, having jobs, different levels of prosperity. You seeing the pastors and you seeing the people that's in a juke joint. You see the people working every day. You see the person drinking alcohol and playing music to get by, and just seeing all of it. It was the truth of us as people without being preachy. It's kind of like people just being. It wasn't necessarily black folks. It was just as people. And it wasn't as if they wasn't adhering to society at the time and stuff was going on, but they were full people within that situation versus broken souls walking around and yes sir master. It wasn't all that, and it was beautiful to see without me feeling, which I often kind of do when I see those kind of movies, slightly embarrassed. And it's not on necessarily the people, but it's a way to present things. Like being an artist and stuff, you know how things are presented makes a difference on how it's taken. And so if you do a wonderful piece of work on a napkin, it's different than having it framed on a wall with protection and glass on it, right? You would look at it differently. It could still be a great piece of work, but if you see it on a napkin, you'll be like, oh, that's cool, versus like, that's gorgeous and beautiful and profound when you see it on the wall. And it could be the same piece of artwork, but just presentation. I'm very sensitive to presentation. And I think that's kind of my issues, not only the amount of them, but the slave narrative and how it's done.
To speak to that, I think that, what we've seen in the past is that responsibility that people feel as filmmakers of color is to show history all the time. I mean, I've had the opportunity to do plays, be involved in plays and, film. And though the difference is plays, it's a very talky dialogue situation.
Right.
Whereas with film, it's like, show me instead of telling me.
Right.
So we were introduced to the character of the environment by the cinematographer. And it was beautiful, right? Everything that she did was just beautiful. You saw the cotton fields, the rows of cotton fields. You saw them driving down this long road to get to where they needed to go. Everything was just filmed as characters, to me. Before we really were introduced to, Cornbread, we had already seen the cotton.
Right.
We already saw what they were doing. They were not, they weren't happy. They weren't, singing, songs. Yeah, they were working just like we do on a regular basis. This is what their job was. It met with the times that they were living in. The wooden nickels had something to do with that too. Like, the explanation of that, as we had spoken before, we heard that don't take any wooden nickels.
Right.
Now you know why. So I think that what was so great about him making this film the way that he did is it was unapologetic. I don't have to do that. I can do exactly what I want to do. And I don't want us to look, sad or weary or downtrodden. I want this to be a film of celebration. I want to show us in a light that's celebratory. And I think that is what his goal was from the very beginning of showing, even when Sammy walked in there looking like he did, with that guitar and opening up the door, we were celebrating them. We were in church.
Right.
You know what I mean? The first celebration you saw was the gathering of us in church, Right. And so, and then the thought of planning, to have this club, in a sense, the juke joint, and what they said was, we want our people to have something to celebrate. We came home because we thought that our folks could use, this in our hometown. You know what I mean? So even when they were off in Chicago, they were still like, okay, what are we going to do with this money? Let's take it home. This could be used at home. When they picked up Sammy and they knew that he, was talented, they knew he played the guitar, but look how they were, mesmerized by just how good he was. They didn't even realize how good he was, but his dad knew. And his dad was trying to save him. Like, what do you say? You keep playing with the devil, one day he's going to follow you home.
Right.
So his father knew, because of his position in life, what could happen. But I think that the way that it was made, it showed us in a great light of being people that are hardworking people, that love each other, that can love people that don't necessarily look like us, but are still of our community and can accept them, i.e., Mary, and call her family and make her feel like she's family. She was a Black woman in that joint.
Right.
She was a Black woman in there. She was able to let her hair down in there.
Right.
Nobody looked at her. The only person that thought she was white was Sammy. You know what I
Right.
mean?
And even he was kind of like, "Are you sure? Are
Right.
you sure
But
she
what
ain't
do you
black?"
say? Don't look her in the eye. You know what I mean? He knew exactly who she was. But like the fact that I always think that like how much joy was on that set when they made that movie.
Yeah.
Because there was like lessons being learned every single day. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
you know, lessons that people that work there didn't even really know about. Like, are we doing this? I can imagine him saying, well, yeah, we're doing this because historically these are the things that happened during that
Right.
time.
Like the whole thing with the two stores, one black, one white,
Yep.
and the Asian folks are working on both sides, own both businesses, and they just kind of interchangeable, and they were that close but still separate. And yeah, it was just so many little nuances and the art of the deal. Like everybody's making a deal. You
Right.
know, Sammy's dad, the pastor, was trying to make a deal with him, and the vampire Rempik was trying to make a deal with him, and you know, everybody's making deals. You know, Smoke is making a deal with Grace about making the signs, and he making a deal with her husband Bo about the food and the stuff. So all these things, he teaching the girl art of the deal. Like you don't accept the first thing somebody offer you. It's just all these little lessons. Like all this stuff is being shared, and you be thinking like, oh, these are some killers, these are some gangsters, these are some quote unquote thug kind of guys, and they're about community. They're trying to include everybody. They're not trying to scheme. They ain't trying to not pay anybody. They're paying top dollar. You know what I mean? It was just, yeah.
Purchase of the barn was a deal. Remember
Right,
that?
right.
Yeah.
They didn't do anything shady. They didn't invite the, you know, the white guy down there and take him out and bury him in the back and just have a have a party on top of his body, you know, like they did to him, but that's how they move. And so it was just like anything you would think you had a notion about, this kind of undercut it. And not undercut it to make it fall, but undercut it to be like, there could be more. I'm not saying this is exactly how it had to be, but this could be that gangster wouldn't just necessarily just be greedy, or that person who does hoodoo would just be a quote unquote witch,
Right.
or that pastor is just a pastor, or that vampire that's white. Of course he's going to be a racist vampire. He's not even racist. Everything was just like not exactly what you thought it was. So perception versus truth. And it played with that with religion. It played with that with hoodoo. It played with that with vampires. It played with that stuff with the Klan. It played with that with the jute joint. Played stuff with the church and the pastor and the people, the cotton fields. It did that with everything.
Yeah.
Connections with Asian folks, with Black community, all
Right.
that stuff was just like, oh, you think this by seeing or what you heard, and this is what a truth of it could be, or a possibility could be. And it was just like, this is brilliant.
Right.
And not like a sign here, look at this part here. This is, you know,
Pay
lesson,
attention.
lesson, lesson,
Right.
lesson,
Exactly.
lesson.
Wake up.
No, it ain't none of that. He didn't have to say
Right.
none of it. Like he just going across the street. He just trying to set up for all this stuff going on for two dudes who robbed some bad guys from a different city, coming to town to spend their money to do a little come up, include the community, and have a good opening night. That's all the movie was. And they get their little cousin who's kind of naive and don't know what's up to come play because he's good. But then also don't want him to stick into that life because they know it's bad, but they need him for
Right.
the come up.
Right.
Come in for this. Don't never want to see you here again. Like, wait a minute, but you put me in the game. Yeah,
Right.
but I ain't never seen nobody happy with this. And I don't want to go down this road of telling you why, I know, but I just never seen nobody doing this for a living happy. Go on
Right.
back to where the good folks are. Leave this mess for us. This is not for you. That's all that was. It was one day of somebody trying to throw a house party. Not a house party, because
Right.
a house party, this ain't no house party here. We want money.
Right.
We want greenbacks, not this red money, not this play money, not this plantation money. And even with that conversation with money, even with the wooden nickels, it's value in the wooden nickels if you are planning on staying in that community, which Annie was planning on staying. So she didn't have a problem with the wooden nickels. But her man, of course, Smoke, he's in the world, so he knows. And so if Annie was planning on leaving, she'd probably be like, yeah, I don't want this money either. But in her community, it works. You know, in the big picture. So they both was right at the same time. She was right for dealing with communal stuff and networks in her circle. And he was right too about dollar being the truth, but only so much truth, because on top of that is racism and systemic power and all the rest of that kind of stuff that will always kind of put a cap on things. But they were both right. You know, church and hoodoo was both right. It was interesting how nothing was downed or put in a way necessarily over something else. It was just, yeah, it was just a lot going on to kind of break myths or preconceptions about things. And I love that because it was so smooth. I saw this movie a few times and it's never a part that I feel like, oh, I want to get through this part. It just goes down so smoothly.
Yeah.
And everything that I saw, like even moments with Delta Slim, and they had picked him up and recounting the story about his friend and how they were on the road and doing music, and the cops had picked him up and they was taking him around, and and they were making money and stuff. And his friend wanted to be a pastor, wanted to go to Little Rock to start a church, and took out too much money. And white folks saw him and accused him of killing a white guy and raping his wife, and they killed him on the spot at the train station. And he's recounting that. And he's telling that story and how he just breaks into humming. Like it was just no more words for it. That was powerful. And I heard that was improvised. And I could believe it because it felt like it. It felt like it. To the point where when, Sammy just looking, and then Michael B. Jordan character Stack is telling him like, hey, you got a guitar, like that's your signal without telling you, so we don't have to mess up the scene. Hey man, start playing. And even he still didn't really get it. He grabbed the guitar, but if that was written out, he would have played and they would have played that whole thing out. But I like the power of the fact that it was improvised and it touched you. It wasn't necessarily right or complete as a scene, but the purity of it and where it came from, it kind of told the truth of where that blues and music and stuff comes from. How it's just like, it's beyond words. And when we hear that humming or hear that tone, we know what that is, even without that story. But it all rides together. It all is one, even though we don't see it for that.
Speaking about the aspect of the women in that film.
Yeah.
I have seen a couple of interviews with him, talking about the film with his wife standing next to him and saying, we.
Yeah.
He's kind of relaying in his conversation, but he'll say we, and he's, looks at his wife. And I feel like that transferred into the film with the female characters. They were all strong women. All of them were strong women. None of them were like a, damsel in distress. They were all very strong women who had strong opinions, and the men listened to them. I'm like, is that how it was back then? Men listen to women back then. You know what I mean? Like they listened to them and they paid attention to what they were saying, and they did.
We're gonna have a whole other conversation, not in this one.
It's not subliminal in the sense of what you see on TV.
Yeah,
it's not subliminal in the sense of what you see in films of like women saying, don't go in that door, and men being like, you're a woman. So like,
what's the last movie you've seen like that? That's not even no modern movie. What movies have you seen where that happens?
Okay, I don't remember all of those.
I know, because it's not like that. It's like if I said, when the last time a black person died on the news, you would be able to, because it's been that recent.
Right.
And that's real life.
And this is just a metaphor. It's not like, this happened.
But I'm just saying, I don't think that it's a thing, because even in all his movies, say Black Panther, you had T'Challa that was a king. Who was his counsel?
Yeah, but that's what I'm talking about him with the way that he purposely makes his films, because he has a mate that he respects.
But I'm saying, what movies
that in public? So why wouldn't it be translated in the films that he makes? That's all I'm saying about him is the way that he purposely, married that association in the films that he does, and how delightful as a Black female that was for me to see Annie being the heroine from the beginning of when this stuff started happening. They looked at her.
Right.
What do you think we should do?
Yeah. I just haven't seen women getting dismissed necessarily in movies for a while now. I'm just saying.
I didn't say that. You see how you misread that whole thing. I didn't say that.
That's why we're talking, having a conversation, because I'm saying that's how I took it. That's what I'm saying. That's why I say, what was examples of it? Because refreshing is like you haven't drank in a while. So you're refreshed because you haven't had it and you take that drink. It's refreshing versus you just drinking some water, right?
So look at this as an example. And because you modernized that ideology in the sense that I just said, we're not talking about modern times. We're talking about if we watched the movie that was set in that time.
Oh, slavery time.
You're telling me that wasn't even slavery. That was sharecropping time.
Right.
When you talk about,
shortly after.
Right. And I like the fact that you talked about slavery and you said, well, it's kind of, it's the same job, that we should have tapped on the fact that, yeah, sharecropping was pretty much that. You signed a contract that you were never getting out of, pretty much. You just kind of work for the same people that your ancestors
And you got
were.
monopoly plantation money that keeps you in that
Right.
loop, keeps you on the plantation. So how far are you going to go if you can't spend your money nowhere else?
Right.
Yeah.
So when we talk about those films that you mentioned before that you're not necessarily a fan of, there's not a lot of women in there that were paid attention to, or, had lines that were, of importance that someone would be paying attention to. You get what I'm saying? So I'm talking about the time period of what that was and how, depending on the film, maybe there is a film out there that's like that where the women was a hero or whatever the situation was.
Well, not necessarily the hero, but you always see, like in the slave narrative movies, there'd be the black guys getting beat at slavery. You see the women in the house either cooking or helping with the kids or talking sassy to the white woman. And so you would hear more of their voice than you would hear the slave, the black guy in the field like that.
I mean, but even when you mentioned The Color Purple, look what happened up until Suge walked in.
Mm-hmm.
It was all about, and Color Purple got a lot of they got a lot of,
because of the narrative and how it was. Put it like this: if a guy did a movie like that and kind of leaned on the women, then that wouldn't be okay.
What are you saying? If
it was flipped, it wouldn't be okay. That's all I'm saying.
Right.
So the fact that exists in one where it's flipped does not, then that says something too.
Okay. What does it say?
Let's get back to our movie.
See, you started it.
I know I did.
Look, jump up and get beat down. And see, now you can't say nothing.
No, I just said it. I just said it. What's the equivalent to that movie? I just said it. And then instead of you hitting it back over, you said, now say something else. I said it. What's the equivalent? What's the flip of that? That we could compare and discuss, where the guy was saying all this stuff in slave times and the woman had nothing to say. And it wasn't their narrative or more insight on their side. That's what I'm saying.
But and that's it kind of, and we're going to get back to it. It just speaks to the fact that, like, I feel like that was important to him. I know that the characters were written that way on purpose to drive the movie. You know what I mean? But I feel like you can write words, right? And they could just be words. But I think the dialogue that was written was very purposeful to make us understand that women matter. You know what I mean? And what they have to say matters, and that they're leaders, as well. And that makes a difference in the times that we live in now, where even being a woman there's erasure going on with that. Astronauts, are, being wiped off the slate, at NASA and stuff like that. People have studied for decades to become in those positions. So I just feel like, for me, I wear several hats,
right.
Mom, a Black woman, a woman, and there's probably 20 other hats that I'm not thinking of right now.
Right.
But those are the ones that pop up first. And so for me, when I first saw Annie in that, at first I thought it was her house, and I didn't know what was going on. I knew he was a father because of him saying Papa's home.
Yeah.
But when I first saw her, I just thought she was the store owner. I didn't know they had a relationship.
Oh, okay.
And that might be because that's how it has always been set up for us. Not always. I'm going to go backtrack on that, backpedal. But oftentimes it's set up for us that the woman has to be of a certain hue and has to be of a certain build, and like, oh yeah, that's definitely his girl. You know what I'm saying?
But in that time period, though, I wouldn't think so in that time period.
But that's because you're scholared in that sense, right? It's because in that sense of like, that's how we looked. We ate.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? We came from some big bone people, so we know that there's different.
And the thing about it is, she's not a big woman necessarily. She's top heavy for sure, but she's not like necessarily if you see how when she wears dresses and stuff, you see how she looks. She's not.
No, we get it because we have people like that in our family, right? We get it. Like, being tall is like a whole thing. You know what I mean? You're just carrying that stuff upward and maybe spread out a little bit more.
Right,
you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So we get that, but what I'm saying is, like, sometimes that doesn't even. This is how authentic he was, because you said, in that time, that's what we look like. But like, if it was somebody else, she might not have looked like that.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
And that would have looked crazy to me too.
But that's the person that's not paying attention to the time and paying attention to trying to fool us who know, like, wait a minute, like we we know we don't all look the same. We
Right,
know
right,
we
right.
don't all look a certain hue and a certain size.
Right.
Like, and then like we would be having this discussion right now. You'd be
Yeah,
like,
we would.
South back then? She was like this? No, you know what I mean? So he
That's like
knew.
Beyonce being a slave. Like, no
Right.
Beyonce. And her eyebrows all done nice and stuff. Like, wait a minute.
Right.
Yeah.
With a little dust on the apron.
Right,
You know
right.
what I mean?
A little dust all day in the field. Yeah.
I mean, she would have the vernacular down pat because she's not far from that. But anyway, I'm talking about her
Yeah.
Southern charm,
Yeah.
but you know what I mean? So
Yeah.
like for me, it's almost like I felt bad like when I realized like, oh, that's his girl. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, oh, that's his girl. That's not like the store owner. That's
Yeah.
his girl.
That's funny.
And for him to, say, I miss you, make me say it. And for them to have that connection, you instantly, all of those like thoughts that you had just fell apart. Like you could visually just see stuff melting like, oh, they're in love. They're in love.
Do you know what's a trip though? And I guess it's what you get from having directors and stuff that you used to seeing their work. You give them a different kind of credit. You kind of know what you're going to versus like a brand new director where you don't know what they're about. And because sometimes certain things feel you on a certain way because you don't know the intentions or where it's coming from. You know what I get tripped up on in movies sometimes is the fact that I don't know the intent of the director. And so I'll see something and I don't know if that's due to budgeting, due to, they like working with this actor. I can't tell if these things are wrong or it's just what the person chose. Like say there was somebody that Zoe Saldana played Annie, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like I would have to wonder, like, okay, depending on if I knew who the director was, I'd be like, hey, that's straight wrong. Why would you have that actress playing a slave?
Right.
But then also if it was a director that I didn't know, and I'd be like, okay, if he put her in there, it's something that's a twist or something.
Mm-hmm.
This is the wrong time. It'd be like one of those other movies we saw where they wasn't really slaves.
Right.
It'd be one of those kind of movies. So sometimes knowing the director and their work affords you a different kind of, like, I could turn off my mind and enjoy for what it is versus trying to dissect, because I can't tell what's on purpose or is a lacking of a person's ability or a situation. You know what I mean? Like Prince, I always give him the credit. And if I don't understand it, it's because of me. I know he knows what he's doing. I know he has purpose for what he's doing. So I would give him more credit than I would even give myself judging his stuff. I would figure I'll have to wait and come around to it versus he's a brand new artist and I don't feel it, so it must be crap because it doesn't connect to me.
That's a really valid statement that you made, or it just chimed so well when you said if I don't understand it, it's because of me. You know what I mean?
Spike Lee too. So I give him credit because I trust how he moves. And if he does something, if it looks like questionable, it's a different thing it's different than surface. It could possibly be versus he just had a bad day. Oh, Spike is tripping. He don't know what he's doing. No, he's a deliberate artist.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Like I said, if certain things were done in other people's hands, I would kind of question it and really be like,
Speaking of, her doing the hoodoo, talking to the kids and stuff like that. And, we talked about the wooden nickels and him saying that's not real money. Here's real money. Take this instead. And she's like, it's blood money. I don't want that. Right. In the after party, you see people saying don't go see it. It's indoctrination. It's like some bad stuff going on. And I was like, but you didn't see it. You know what I'm saying? Like all that showed was an aspect of who we were at that time, that there were people who brought their African roots stem from hoodoo and different, religions, you know what I mean? And he didn't go into Christianity. I mean, he did sort of, you know what I mean? But he didn't do like a deep dive into like an indoctrination of that. You know what I mean? Like
that's what I say.
Africans weren't studying. They weren't Christian when they were in their tribes, but so how did they become, Christians?
Exactly. He wasn't cutting everything off at the knees like he could have. He gave everything a kind of a fair thing, but also telling you where it kind of came from.
Right.
Because even Delta Slim was like, unlike religion, this came from us. This came from Africa. You know what I mean? I was like, oof. And he's like, I can't speak for anything else, but this music here, this here we have, this is us. And it was just like, wow. Now he didn't talk about it. He just didn't mention. He just said where
Right.
this came from.
Right.
And I love how I'm just giving you all the options, and I'm letting you
To
decide.
think, critical thinking.
Right, and you figure out what you think it needs to be.
Right.
And like I said, I just love it wasn't down in none of that stuff. And the truth is, it's like everything what people were doing and practicing was working for them, right?
Right.
And and I thought this being, even though it's not presented like this, but a quote unquote black movie, I felt it rolled with the horse it rode in on. And I think that for it to side with other things would be kind of undercutting what this movie is about.
Yeah, because he was only showing the different aspects
Right.
of us not being a monolith. You know
Right.
what I mean? Like we are all different people. We don't obviously we come in different hues, but we come from different backgrounds. You know what I
Right.
mean? And the fact that she gave history on her background, like, my mom, my grandma, my aunt, you know what I
Right.
mean? She went far back. And that was the lesson. And the lesson only lasted for a few minutes when
Right.
he was like, I don't believe it. Yeah, but you still got that pouch around your neck. And that's
Exactly.
your brother's still above ground.
Right.
So
Right.
what?
And she gave him the bag and she said, and I prayed for you. She said the
Right,
word pray. So it's a
right,
combination of both. So you
right,
don't know what's the active ingredient in that medicine. It could
right,
be the hoodoo. We don't know. And I love that because we don't know. We
right.
don't know. What I
Mhm.
do know for sure is that even regardless of where it came from, it could have all started, from the motherland. It could have.
Right.
But I know that even food comes from home. If the server has dirty hands, you're gonna get some of that dirt on your food.
Mhm.
And so, you know, that doesn't make where the food came from bad. We
Mhm.
really don't know. And to take somebody's word for it, to dismiss something that might actually be yours, that might actually work, and might actually been missold and mislabeled, so you'd be afraid of it, could be what works for you.
Mhm.
And so I just think that we as a people have to be open. And if we didn't come to a conclusion that something was wrong or bad for us, and we didn't do that journey or find out or figure out with our own investigation versus a person who don't like you telling you what's right and what's wrong, you know, because a lot of times we just move on autopilot. This is what we always heard. This is how
Right.
we were conditioned. This is whatever. And we are just, as time goes, we are just seeing so many truths of things that we wasn't even expecting. Certain
Right.
things we kind of just came across like, oh, you grow up and no, this is not true, or oh, this is really how this goes. But it really doesn't go as deep as it really should with a lot of things that are really tied to us. It's just like when we're doing it, the blues is evil, rock and roll is evil, but it's always because it's coming from us, not what it is, but the fact that it's coming from us.
Mhm.
And nothing that society kind of says come from us is good. It's just like a tolerance of it when they figure they can make money off of it or exploit it. But until then, it's a joke. It's laughed at. They don't like our butts until they could get the butts. They don't like our big lips until they can get the big lips. They don't like the food. Now is, this cool thing. They didn't like the music. People spin on their heads. The context is always changing. And once again, for this movie, and once again with that scene, with that music and stuff, seeing that twerking next to the women that was in the kitchen dancing while they were cooking, listening to the music and grooving, and how that twerk was similar to what they were doing around that table. How the way those guys were kind of dancing and doing the feet shuffling thing in the juke joints next to the guys crip walking, the turntable on top of the stage where the band would be, the guy hip hop dancing. You got the woman doing the ballet, the like Alex Haley kind of dancing and stuff with some of the motions that the people were doing, how the Asian woman was dancing like the geisha dance, and her husband Bo, how he had this, it's almost like this martial artist, but the way that the forms moved were almost like modern dances. How that begat that, how it put so much stuff in context. It puts stuff in context. You see somebody just dancing, crip walking the street, you think them knucklehead thugs in the street just dancing crazy, or those girls just twerking, shaking their butt out of context. This movie put a lot of stuff in context. So if you thought it was a joke before, it laid it out where it's not so funny. Be careful what you're laughing at. Be careful what you're dismissing. be careful dismissing the origins of things. You
Right.
know, it's not silliness. It's not, it's us having things that we don't understand as a people, the context of, and we are misusing, you know? Like, yeah, to somebody, twerking looked silly until they saw it in this movie presented this way. Context is so important. And like I said, I think this movie just put a lot of things that was left up to somebody else's interpretation and told to us to accept, pulled it away from that and kind of gave it maybe a more truthful or more insightful context that we probably should need to go back and revisit and look up some of the stuff and see what some of all this stuff is, and not just, like I said, having somebody who don't necessarily care for you give you an interpretation of what came from you.
Right. I agree with that because I think about, like, when we talk about during those times and how, she at that door again was the first person that was like, something's not right. You know what I'm saying? And everyone paying attention to her. If you take her out of that space, that barn, that they were in, and you put her back in, what was it, the store that she was in, and people were going to her, and people knew her in the community. People loved, you could tell she was loved. She was loved and respected and stuff. I think that sometimes there are, we accept people as a people because that comes from way back. You know what I mean? Like, oh, either you believe in that or you don't, but we know what she does. You can utilize that source or not. We know what she does, but she's a nice person. Doesn't take away from who she is. She's a loving person. She gives her heart to everybody. We know exactly what her purpose is, and it served the purpose for everybody in that moment when your intuition knows something's wrong. Especially, I can only speak as a Black woman because that's who I am. I've always been intuitive, so much so that, like, I didn't know what it was necessarily until, like, like I had an ex-boyfriend say, "You've always been intuitive, you just don't know how to use it." Not like it's a power, but when you have that first thought.
It is in a way, especially if you use it. It's a power if you use it,
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Your mind is telling you. So I feel like when everybody was at that door, their intuition was like, it just doesn't feel right. But she was the one that was speaking to it. You know what I mean? She was the one that pulled it out of them. Like, let me be the spokesperson for this without volunteering. And everybody was looking to her in that moment because of her background. You know what I mean? That was the business that she was in. So all of that to say, when I saw those kind of remarks and stuff, and I was like, this is what happens sometimes when, take one person and say, don't do this. And then all of a sudden there's a whole crowd of people saying, yeah, don't do it because of this, when you're not experiencing these things for yourself. You either make a decision like, that's not my thing. I don't want to see a movie like that because I don't want to stir up anything and have to, carry that with me. We talk about carrying stuff that's not good for you. We honor that.
Yeah.
Don't say it's a bad movie when you've never given it any thought, the actual movie.
And touching on you talking about like the Black woman being hurt, where I was really just coming from, now that I kind of think about it, a simpler way for me to put it is like, I honestly don't think that, especially like Black men, I don't think that for the majority, Black men are dismissive to women like that, or like you have nothing to add or nothing to say, because for a lot of us, that's who kept our household, with fathers or not with fathers. Either way, mom was the one that kind of held everything down. Dispersal of the money, how stuff was doing, handling with wrangling kids, and people got to be where they got to be, holding the household down and stuff like that. And so for me, like when I hear, or it's like, dismissive of women, I'm like, now the culture when, and I don't think it's by accident, when it got lopsided with like the, music videos and songs and stuff like that, all that kind of stuff. Guys, as much as girls, when they first hear all this, some of this hip hop and stuff, we're kind of like, what? Like, it almost got invented that day when folks heard it like that, because you didn't walk around talking crazy. Matter of fact, you see a woman, walking by, you straighten up, even if you're talking crap with your boys. So I don't remember us really having a culture of us just like dismissing women and stuff like that. Like I said, you see something like Color Purple or something like that, but it was like, I didn't remember. Now, not to say your parents didn't get into it and stuff, but just like that evil, this coldness, like, does that happen? Yes. Can it happen? But I'm talking about the majority of just being for me. Like I said, I just thought it was
we
kind of
have to
interesting
keep in
to
mind
see.
we're only talking about the context of film, not necessarily real life. You know what I'm saying? We're
Yeah, yeah,
talking
yeah.
about how we're depicted in films.
Right, right. But I'm saying, but people take it as that's okay. People don't say like, where are we talking about pretends right now? Nobody said that pre thing. So it's almost as if when stuff is said, if it's not a deliberate separation of it, you would assume, like I'll say, oh, if a kid, da, 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 people, if they know I have a kid, would think that I'm talking about my kids without me. But if I know if it's something crazy, I'm like, for example, I said something that, and I think I sent it to you this way, where somebody was talking about abuse of young black boys. They were talking about abuse that a mother did to a child or something. And I sent it because I thought it was an interesting conversation speaking to that. And I had to put a note on there saying, hey, I'm not saying my mom did this to me. I'm just saying I related to what he was talking about, but I'm not saying me because it could be taken as me sending something that I said I understood some points about as me agreeing with the whole thing or me saying that this is my situation. And so when we talk about, songs and being disrespectful or men being disrespectful to women or movies or whatever, it's kind of without any kind of separation or saying, hey, I'm talking about this in particular, it could be taken as you talking about real life or everything or even yourself, depending on what's being said.
Well, I would hope in this context of
Yeah.
film, when making a statement like that, and mentioning, like, as I mentioned before, how often have you seen films like this where women get that glow,
Yeah.
where they get that spotlight, where they say something and it has some validity to it that moves things, that moves the film into the next scene, and people are relying on this person, and men are taking a back seat to it. You know what I mean? I'm not saying that happens, and I'm talking about this time period, as I mentioned before.
Yeah.
You don't often get to see that kind of stuff, and as I was saying about Color Purple, it got a lot of backlash from women, because of the way that women were depicted in Color Purple, until Suge walked in and basically was like, yeah, you don't have to take this. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And forgot her character's name, but Whoopi started getting some gumption about herself. It
Right.
took somebody like that to walk into that scene.
Right.
So yeah, that was a joke. How
Uh,
we got this way. But it was a joke in the sense of thinking about that time when we
yeah.
lived in that era, and equating that to it had to be Annie because of her stance in that community, because of the
Yeah.
amount of respect that she carried in that community, that when she spoke, people listened, you
It,
know.
but that made me think too. You know what's so interesting about this time, like the Color Purple, like this movie and stuff like that, or slave narratives, is the fact that since it's not a lot of information, or it is information, it's not a lot of necessarily access or people know where to look or to even question the way things are presented. That since people are really not digging for that kind of stuff, their truth is what they're gonna see.
But that's a good point too, because sometimes it's purposely made like that. That's
Right.
really going back to the point that I was making. If
Right.
people
So
want women to be viewed that way, or men to be viewed that way, they make films that way. They don't
right.
want to show them with any strength. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
It's
exactly. Exactly. And so even though we know that it's not real, it moves culture because the majority of culture will probably just go and run with it because it's nothing, it's the visual thing with the good lighting and the good acting, and it's like that's how that is. And just riding with that versus it's like we don't have enough stuff to offset the stuff that's being given. It's like stuff not being fact checked. And that's what makes entertainment so dangerous is that it's so digestible and so streamlined and it gets folded into history. It gets folded into life and stuff. It could move stuff so quickly, but it doesn't have the responsibility to be truthful. It doesn't have the responsibility to give equal say. You know what I mean? Like, it's just funny. It's just like, you just walking around with a dangerous tool and they know that's why they get funded and it's so important that it gets pushed and stuff like that. But it's just kind of like we're just playing with a dangerous medium and almost kind of like Sammy and his ability and his music It's all this stuff and they're just grooving to it. And they don't know what they truly are dealing with. And if they did know, would they still move to it that way? Would they charge more at the door to get in? Would they do it in a more sacred place? Like, would that change stuff? I don't know. But I do feel this film adds. I think it adds in a really cool way. I think that it's definitely a checkered board that either it could be checkers being played on it or it could be chess played on it. And so if you understand the rules of checkers, you could easily take it for what it is and it's just like, oh, vampire movie happened back in the day. A little bit of racism in there, blah blah blah. Or it could be, chess, where certain things have these certain moves that it can make. There's a goal to get that main piece, the strategy on the way that the moves are happening instead of just happenstance. It's almost like you gotta think ahead to play, and you could get both sides of that from this movie. Even if it didn't have vampires in it, I still would love it. And like you said, the way the women were handled in it, I thought was beautiful and more to how us as a people, regard women. Because really, if we wasn't, we would be in a bigger mess than we are. I think we have a lot of stuff that just kind of have us off of our square. And because of that, it's making everything else kind of fall apart or not be as a strong setup as we would normally have. I think that current conditions and stuff going on is making us kind of line back up in our square because really that's the foundation to have things move. I think women have, like in this movie, have always been able to read the guy. Like he could tell his friends whatever he want to tell them, but their women know the truth, even with the guy not saying it, to the point where the guy can't even respond. They could just have a weird look or, start splaining because he got stuck because she just read him and everybody else either didn't know or wasn't bold enough to say because they was afraid. Those women was not afraid of those guys. Everybody else is afraid of them. Some are afraid, some respect, whatever. But those women, both Annie and Mary, knew those guys well, knew what to say, wasn't afraid to tell them the truth or throw something back in their face. And those guys both respected them in a way and let them shine and do what they do. Like anybody with good sense, knowing like if your woman got your back, she could change your world. You might be the one pushing down the heavy walls, but she's the one to make sure you ate enough to be strong enough to have the energy to push it. And if you got hurt, she'll be able to help bandage you and get you back to health so you can go out there and push it again to make more roadway for him and his family. And so yeah, I thought it was beautiful. I thought that Annie, her purpose was insight, and like I said, people respected that. And to deny that would be to spite yourself. Our people, I think we lost our way in some ways, yes, for sure. But I think that was kind of our thing anyway. I think we had more of a balance, more of an understanding of how things worked or what worked for us as a people internally to move forward and do things. And I just think a lot of stuff just got incorporated and pushed off and new norms introduced that wasn't for us. It's like they get cows fatter now, but they feeding them the wrong food. Chickens getting fatter now, but they're feeding them the wrong food. So you're getting results, but it's not the natural results that you would normally get. And so we get fatter chickens, but the quality of the chicken isn't as good. We get bigger vegetables, but they're modified. So the things that's in there that would have been for us as nutrients is no longer there. It's a cost for this stuff. We're paying for convenience. And that convenience is what's going to hollow us out. And we're thinking we're eating, doing, and treating people the right way. And we are not. And we're messing relationships up. We're eating malnourished foods. We're turning our thing that's supposed to be natural and correct, it's being corrupted and turned against us. And we're thinking we're moving the same way we're moving, and we're off. And the truth of that is the results that we get. It's not magic that old folks don't deal with young folks in the same way. It's not magic that it's hard to keep your weight up or to stay healthy. It's not magic that you could do all the stuff you're supposed to do and still end up jail. It's not magic that you can go to school and study and be a smart person, but you can not get a job. You could be not respected. It's not magic that instead of being impressed that you could just come up with art and music without taking a lesson could be discarded as, you're not legitimate unless you get their paper, their diploma, their master's degree, when you could do it without even studying, but you get no credit for that. That's not by mistake. And so, as long as we're going by society's insight or what they call something and not going by the truth of it, then we are going to be in trouble. We're going to be off our square and we're going to be confused and feeling broken and not understanding how come this doesn't add up. Because they're playing with plantation money. That's why it don't add up. That's why you can work all day and not have no money. That's why you can eat healthy and still be sick. All this stuff, it doesn't make sense. It doesn't add up. And I think a lot of us is losing it because the math ain't mathing. And it's because everything is not what it says it is. It's not presented as what it is. Like I said, back to this movie, it deals with a lot of that kind of stuff in a nice, slick way, not offensive, but you kind of, if you go in there ready to play chess, you will get all the brilliant moves that were 10 steps ahead. And if it's checkers, it was just like this quick witted game that the faster you move, the faster you get to the end. It could be either way.
So, who said this? If I could have convinced more slaves that they were slaves, I could have freed thousands more. Who said that?
Was it Harry Tubman?
Yeah. And I look at that in reference to, kind of what we were talking about earlier in the sense of just being believed or, in the moment when it matters, in the moments when there's danger and being able to be a leader in that sense and being trusted, that the right way to go in a sense and what she does or what she did. Yeah. So one of the things that we didn't talk about was racism. I did like that it has been said several times that this movie wasn't about, racism. Mm-hmm. And in fact, what's his name? Remick, mm-hmm. that he encountered a form of racism with being Irish in a sense, how they were deemed then and all of the history that he was basically telling. And so I like the fact that he was giving that lesson, that he was, the director made reference to the suffering of, the Irish in that sense and wasn't just like, well, I suffer too, but gave the lesson of how it occurred to him and how it harmed him and that he just wanted what they had. And the fact that he did warn them, oh, well, they're going to come and do what they're going to do anyway, so we might as well kind of get together and take care of this ourselves. I like the fact that he showed like a connection there, for people to understand that there was a time when Irish people were not considered white people. They weren't.
Until it was convenient to society because they needed
right.
numbers up. So they started letting folks into the club. But with that, regardless of your intentions, you could still be guilty of harm. And it's like if somebody meant to step on your foot or accidentally stepped on your foot, you still feel the pain of somebody stepping on your foot, regardless of the intentions. And so, even though he was an option, that wasn't a bad option, that made sense in a way, you would still have to die and be compromised under his ruling. So he would still turn into that thing that society at that time was still doing.
Right.
It almost like a gentler way in a way, I guess, but still, you would still have to die to join and you would lose yourself. Now, you would all be mixed in there together and community and all the other kind of stuff, but you would be lost in the sauce in a way,
And that was a play on the appropriation as well, because what we saw in the club, you understood that he wanted it. You understood that, but then when you actually saw what he wanted, like, no, I want you to do all of that you're doing it, but I want to cultivate it and make it into my culture, my style. I want to call it my own. It was a clear cut case of appropriation. And, and it was effortless. You know what I mean? It was just kind of, because everybody was like, oh, they out there jamming. You know what I mean? Oh, look at them. And everybody was happy and they looked like they were having a good time. And so when you think about the fact that even we do that, even when we're appropriated, people were still dancing to Justin Timberlake. You know what I'm saying? Like, you know what I mean? They're like, I like that song that he made, even though it's turned into something differently. It just shows you how historically appropriation kind of works in our society.
Right. It's nothing wrong being separate and have your own cultures, and then you share between cultures and stuff, but you still have to have yours. And that whole homogenous thing is just crazy. They were doing the Irish songs and Irish dancing, and they're black, and it's in unison, but it's like, but that's not our culture.
Right.
And it's just like, well, that just shows you how it works for one. And then also the difference between how a culture could be on their own and when their culture is folded in. Almost like us being folded into American society. Like we're dancing that jig, that Irish jig, just like we're those vampires dancing around the fire, with the wrong beat.
Right. Because they weren't doing that before. They were playing their little
We're them vampires.
right, exactly. I mean, the way that
And
like
and that's not freedom. We're just offbeat Irish dancing black folks.
right. But if you look at how they were before,
Yes.
you just focused on appropriation. It was like they came there strumming like, and blah blah blah. You know what I mean? Singing the
Pick
song.
poor Robin
But
clean.
before
Pick
that,
poor rotten clean.
before Robin Clean, there was the song that they approached them with, which was a lullaby, and they were like, "Yeah, we don't get down like that. Go down the road. There's
Yeah,
plenty
yeah.
of people who can appreciate you." They
Right.
didn't come there dancing, getting down and stuff with them at the door, because if they did, they might have let them in. Oh shoot, you know what I'm saying? Oh,
Right.
you can do that? You know what I'm saying? They read that wrong. Their approach was wrong in trying to get in from the beginning, because they should have been crip walking from the beginning or
Exactly. Exactly.
trying to get in that club.
Just show
So
that
they
we're down. Yeah.
exactly, but they didn't have that. And that's what we're
Yeah.
talking about. They hadn't possessed that character of a person like that, or
Yeah.
of a culture like that yet.
But that's how Remick sees it. He's seeing like you bringing bread, I'm bringing salad.
Right.
We could do this together.
Right.
That's how he's thinking because that's how he sees things. He wants to fold them in. They don't want to be folded in. They don't like salad.
Right.
Like you said, he came with the wrong bait.
Right.
Like you said, if he was up there crip walking, like you said, and oh, brother.
Right.
But then also that shows we shouldn't be so quick. We shouldn't be so quick to be letting folks in anyway, just because they, serving something that we like or something familiar. That also shows to that too.
Right.
We should just be letting stuff in and stuff like that.
I mean, it's just funny in the sense of how their dance was when she was like, "We're gonna walk off slow."
Right.
And she did a little skip, like
Yeah.
bloop, bloop, and that was like dancing to her, like doop, doop. And as soon as they got them, it was a jam session. It was
Yeah.
everybody was having
Yeah.
fun.
Even though it was like a Irish song, you heard like the choir in the background. Yeah. You hear the music gospel choir raising in the background, and he was in heaven. He was in the middle, just like, yeah, my new people.
Exactly. Exactly. The beauty of him, writing that for us.
Yes.
You know what I mean? And to be able to, there's going to be college courses about this eventually to just analyze all of that. But just from the door all the way to when it got to that point where he appropriated, you know what I mean, and got his crew together,
Yeah.
and seeing how everybody, and they were enjoying themselves, you know what I mean? And I imagine, as I had mentioned before, that filming it was enjoyable because it's something that they had, most folks had never done before. Those extras, and then again, they might have been professional dancers in there too, but some of them weren't. You know what I mean? So it was all new for everyone. But then there's also the aspect of when we think about Roseville, and we think about the Wall Street bombing thing. We over there minding our business, talking about, at the end, how it turned out in it. Like you said, he came in there with the proper amount of money, probably gave him more than he asked for, because when he opened the bag, he was
like, oh.
probably was like, there's some extra in there. So we mean business. We don't want you, we're about business. We don't want you coming back here. There's no reason for you to come back. And so, again, over here minding our business, segregated, doing well. Everybody in the community is respecting each other. We're doing what we need to do to survive. And at the end, you bring in the Klan. And he said like that grand opening, grand closing kind of thing. You know what I mean? Like that was always your intention, no matter what. No matter how we come to you, no matter how we're dressed, no matter how we look, no matter how much we give you, respect even we give you.
Exactly.
You still are going to destroy us.
Exactly.
And for what?
That's all I was saying. Even with that green money that works in the world, it has a plateau. It's only so high up you could go being black, even with money. That's why they were doing a little talk about, the plantation money versus his money and what real money is and real money's power. Even that has a limit in society, as him being a black man with money.
He knew that he wasn't gonna survive that. He did get all of them, but he knew he wouldn't have been able to live there after doing all of that. He would have
Yeah.
had to leave. So if you're gonna leave and your brother's already gone, you know, your girl's already gone, your baby's gone, you don't have family there.
Right.
Your goal is to save Sammy, and you're just like, you know, get out of here.
Right.
You know, I felt like he was ready to go. You know, I
Yeah.
felt like he knew that that's the way he was going to go out. He was ready to go.
When he took off that hoodoo bag, he was done.
Yeah.
I'm tired of being protected.
I was concerned. Like, wait a minute.
Yeah, yeah, he wanted to be with his lady and his baby. And when they showed that scene, I thought it was so powerful. I got choked up because it was just like, I don't know. I'm assuming that it's okay. I'm assuming it's not in his head. That's really how it works because that's what she said when she talked about it before. And so I'm so glad that he had that. He had his situation. You know, he had his family. He was one with them, even if it wasn't here. And that's almost another thing with Ryan Coogler, with the whole thing with like even with Black Panther, how your family's waiting for you on the other side, that they're there. And so I thought that was beautiful that he had that. And so it made me feel a little bit better for when I saw, that Stack was still around and Mary was still around, that he had his situation, his brother had his situation, and Sammy in a way had his resolve, you know. And I thought it was interesting how they played with the religion part, as far as like when Sammy was fighting Remick at the end. Well, not really necessarily fighting him; he was getting beat up and thrown around and stuff. But how he went to what he knew, which was prayer, saying and trying to say the Lord's prayer, and how that didn't work in that situation, and how even Remick said the prayer with him, and how he
Yeah.
said that's the same thing they gave me. They gave me religion too when they took my daddy's land. And even though I know that how it was used on me, that I still feel warm when I hear it. It still makes me feel a ways when I hear those words, even though he knows what damage that brought to him. And how the Lord's Prayer didn't help Sammy in that situation. His guitar did, his music did, in a way. So
And that baptizing that he was doing
yeah,
in that sense was a newness, a renewal of religion, a new kind of religion, a new culture. Like you're about to enter, you know, into this world. So I don't know. I mean, I just kind of thought of it in a sense of like, you know, Remick was like, yeah, he was a bad guy, but he was, I don't
right,
know. I mean, he was a complex
right,
character because he was about business. He never said he didn't want to be a vampire, but
yeah,
he was like, this is the result of what occurred to me,
mhm,
and it's inevitable that it's going to happen to other people. I'm trying to make it plain, and I'm trying to make it a clean transition. Like,
yeah,
we ain't got to fight. You know, I'm trying to make it easy for everybody. And I think when he was doing, I think that it touched him when Sammy was doing that, and it
yeah,
did bring up all those things. And then I think that everyone says the same thing. Like, it was a baptism. Like,
yeah,
okay, well, let's get you ready because you're getting
yeah,
ready to transition into this.
right.
So you need to, you know, let's have these last moments with those thoughts and who you were before and come into the fold.
Right,
You
because
know,
it's almost like his introduction he did at the door at the juke joint, and he came in with the wrong thing. And he's like,
right?
"Oh, Sammy, you like religion, huh? Oh, I got a little bit of
Mhm.
that too. Let me
Exactly.
help you. So you
Right.
like the word, and you believe in baptism and all that. I got that too. I can give you
Mm-hmm.
that.
Mm-hmm.
Matter of fact, I'm giving you the same deal your dad was giving you
Mm-hmm.
at the beginning of the movie.
Mm-hmm.
The same deal. And it's kind of interesting. They all have both ways of having salvation in different ways, but and that kind of makes sense why during the beginning of the movie, at the very beginning of the film, the first 5 minutes when he drives up and goes to the church, you see this flashes of Remick happening when his dad's talking about Sammy, come here, Sammy, and you see Remick flashing in there and come back to us, and you see the flashing. So those offers were being overlaid, the one with the vampire and the one with the dad at the very beginning of the movie. We start off with
You got
that.
to unpack that part a little bit. So unpack that a little bit where you said you saw Remick with his dad?
Yes, in the beginning when he walks into the church after driving in, he's all bloody and he got the piece of guitar in his hand. When he's
Right.
walking toward, when he says, "Sammy, come up front to the congregation," and you hear somebody scream, "Sammy!" in the background. As he's walking, there's cutscenes of Remick and he got these glowy eyes, and you see his
Right.
blood, and
Right.
he walks a little further, and you see Remick slashing his face, and you just seeing like the traumas of all the stuff that was going on with him, and him in the
Okay.
water with Remick is overlaid. It's like his dad and Remick was given the same, "Come to me, this is your salvation. You know, drop this, accept this." It was overlaid.
I
The very first 5 minutes of that movie that was shown.
I saw that part. I think the part that kind of in my mind was kind of not throwing me, but I was overthinking it a bit is, you know, when you said he was like, "Oh, I'll give you the same deal as your dad."
Oh, he didn't say
I
that,
was
but I'm
like,
saying the way it was cut was the
because that
similarity.
kind of threw me a little, because I was like, did he have some kind of, you know, encounter with his father at some point? But he couldn't have.
No, his encounter was him telling him to come back to the congregation. We'll take you, but I just need you to accept. I need you to drop the guitar, and I need you to
Right,
accept.
right.
You know, so that was the same
No,
thing.
I was talking about Remick.
No, Remick was just telling him, you know, pulling him in. He was in the same situation with him,
Right.
sharing the Lord's Prayer with him and telling him basically, we're going to make beautiful music together. We're going to,
Right.
you know, it was the same thing. And he didn't drop the guitar piece for Remick, and he didn't
Right.
drop the guitar piece for his dad.
Mm-hmm.
He got
Yeah.
in the car and went stage left. He just kept on driving,
Mm-hmm.
just left.
Yeah.
But it was
Yeah.
almost the same kind of setup. It kind of booked in each other in a way.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
To me, that's how I saw it.
Yeah. Because I was thinking, like, he just knew a lot. Like, how did he know that they were going to come? The clan was coming back. Like, you know,
How did
how
who
did he
know?
know that?
How
Was
did
he
who?
like listening and he
Who?
heard it? Talking about Remick. Remember when he told them, "Oh,
well,
the clan's coming back to burn the barn down and
he-
kill y'all"?
he said that it was a coincidence that he happened to go across them two clan members, and this is I think he said the nephew of the head clansman, and
That's what it was.
And I know that they're coming to kill you guys tomorrow.
That's what I forgot. Yeah, I
Because he
forgot
was
that.
like, "Hey, you know, we can go circle back and go get them on the way out.
Yeah.
We'll get them sanctified." That's what he said. He made a joke, something like that. "We'll get them on the way back." But just so happened, I think that's why he also knew that they were even there. Not only because Sammy's beacon of the song and him singing, but he also knew
Right.
to go there because he knew that the guy he bit, that was the nephew of the head clans guy, was coming there to kill all them folks, kill all
Right,
them black
right.
folks.
Yeah, that's what it was. That's the piece I missed. Because I was like, he didn't, you know, I had to think about that. So yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, his character was complex, and I think we all kind of walk away with one thing we think and we kind of say we know is that he wasn't racist.
No. Because he was like trying to get into the door, and it's like, "I can't come in because of what? This?" And he rubs his finger. And then he was like,
he could take it off.
right. And then he's like, I'm here for love and the community. And matter of fact, how did she get in there?
Right.
You know, and they're looking at Mary, and they're like, "Well," and he's like, "Oh, she's family. Don't you worry about how she got in here."
It's almost like when he said, because of this, like he could have turned around and been a different color. Oh, let me switch it up real quick. Let me become black or something all of a sudden. But like,
Well, I think he almost kind of know that, you know, us as a people, we're kind of open in general to our detriment sometimes, and was kind of surprised that one, they all kind of got a bad vibe off of him.
right.
And so he just, instead of saying like, "Oh, you feel danger from me," he's trying to help them feel probably guilty about blowing them off because of his skin color. Because he knows more than likely black folks is not going to be tripping about that like that.
Yeah.
But him seeing Mary in there, he probably went to like, "Oh, your spidey sense is tingling probably because of my skin. Is it this?"
Yeah.
Not that they feel like something is just not right about this dude. Like regardless, they were blindfolded and they heard him talking. They probably still have a vibe like, you know,
that was that intuition that we talked about earlier.
Exactly.
It wasn't the skin color. It was something deep. And
but I think he did that to throw them off, to be like, if you're feeling weird, it's not because of this, is it? Or actually, it's not because of that. But he was just trying to like, you know what I mean? Like somebody like feeling like somebody being sensitive about something. They walk across the street and he'd be like, "But I don't want to feel messed up because it's not cool for me to walk across the street." But no, if you feel that's a bad vibe,
right,
it's not all just because of what you've seen on TV. Sometimes it'd be really something to that. And so if I'm, you know, me being a black dude, if I see something that feels wrong, I will cross the street. And not me being, I'm afraid of my fellow black man. It's kind of like, if I got a bad vibe, I'm not going to be like, I'm going to walk on that side of the street, even though I feel weird or something's off about it, just to prove that I'm not thinking bad thoughts. I'm not going to do that.
But I think that
and some people would and regret it.
Right. I think when we talk about the intuition, it's obviously ingrained in us because of our history and, of coming to this, coming to this country, not coming, but being forced in that sense to come from way back from our ancestors to when we talk about the intuition or the instincts at the door of like something else is going on and thinking about the church where those folks were killed and the young white man that walked into that space. And I'm sure they felt similarly like, because of our instincts and our ancestors kind of speaking like, yeah, this is, in the way that you present yourself and why are you here? You know what I mean? And yet they welcomed him and they prayed with him. And then in the end, he lets one go and says, now go run and tell him what happened here. You know what I'm saying? So like that instinct is always going to be in us because that's inherited,
But sometimes we bypass it because we don't like how it looks.
Right.
I'm saying screw how it looks. You go by your gut.
Right.
I'd rather look bad and be right than to not listen to my gut and be wrong.
Right. Right.
Sometimes we'll try to do the save face. Oh, I don't want to look like I don't distrust people. There's nothing wrong with distrusting people. Right. It should be on the person to make you feel or to convince you to trust them. We're getting too much upfront credit. Mm-hmm. I'm guilty of that too. But as I've gotten older, I've learned I don't really give too much credit. I let people earn their credit, and I'll be a fair judge and mark what I see is fair. But to just automatically, just because you are this, you get that. I can't. That's not the kind of world we live in. I can't give nobody that.
I think that definitely comes with, we could say, oh, it comes with age. We learn things as we go along, but we got these kids.
Yeah.
That's going to be their way of life, that they're going to have to, it's not going to be, offering up trust from the beginning. It's going to be earning from the beginning from now on because of the society that we are now living in.
And we can't feel bad about giving that advice because that advice will save their life. Go with your gut. Even if it looks bad, you still move how you got to move because we have a society where you don't want to look bad. It's more important not to look bad than to do the right thing.
Right.
And I'm like, screw that. You move with what's the right thing and what makes sense for you because really there's so much stuff that's being offered that you will accept just because you want to look bad, but it's compromising with your gut and what you know. And it's like, nothing on the outside should make you give up more than you're willing to give. And if that's ever an issue, that's a sign.
Right.
That's a sign. That doesn't make you wrong. Mm-hmm. You need to find out why that's not sitting right.
Right.
To accept everything is dangerous. That's the wrong thing to do.
That is the key word right there, because I think, we've had conversations about how to prepare like our kids, yours obviously being younger and mine, older, adults rather.
Right.
And how I, kind of have these conversations with them and stuff now. And it's like, now the conversation is a family conversation about how to just, walk away from stuff. Yeah. Everybody just, don't engage, just period. Don't engage. Even if everything in you is like, no, I need to tell this person that they need to not do this or get out my face. No, just don't engage, because that fuels the other person. It fuels them. That's what they want. So now that's the lesson that we have to teach our kids, no matter what, no matter if they're cheering on the other side, like, yeah, you see that. Okay, great. Because you walk away to see another day. That's as simple as it is nowadays. You walk away to see another day.
Yeah, we came here to serve drinks, not for all this other stuff.
Yeah.
Grace.
I get it now. I know what that means.
Grace.
I get it now. I get grace now. I mean, but it took that, we had this conversation, before.
Yeah.
And I didn't buy into anything deeper than like, that's how, people are along, I didn't get into any of that as much as I was just like, I was disappointed that it ended that way. I wanted more. Yeah. And I think that's why I know that's why I felt like that. It wasn't the entire movie. It was just that, like, I feel like I'm missing something, like I feel like, and there were like the Easter eggs, if you will, at the end, but I felt like, no, but they were ready to fight. And so the thing about it is, the fact that you mentioned earlier, well, that's how it is in movies like this. They're vampires. So they're that's not my thing.
Right.
My thing is Black history, and my thing is like us surviving stuff, and that, you know what I mean? So that was my mindset walking out. Like, but they just gave up. Like they were trying to come up with a plan. I think you mentioned that he was thinking when she was saying that. And then I saw, when all of them grabbed her and tried to cover her mouth, like, stop, don't say that. So like, and that's how, in a sense, how we are as a people, when we talk about our survival and going through all these different things that have happened to us, slavery and, the depression and civil rights and stuff like that, is to think, is to process things, is to like, okay, we need to come up with a plan, and it might take a while for us to, to get there and be successful and all of that kind of stuff. And I think my knowledge of that with watching films that are based in, our history, that's what I was looking for. Like, no, wait.
Yeah, but then you also could have even reality situations where somebody just fires off without thinking about it. Like I said, him shooting those guys in the beginning, that wasn't really a lot of thinking. He just saw, this is a situation, I'm gonna handle it. Now he shot real quick for the first one, and he thought about the second one, but he still shot them. So we could still have kind of quick reactions. And like I said, some of that stuff I think is just like for the narrative purposes. And do I feel like it was a little short stopped really with the ending? Yeah, in a way, because it seemed like it did need to go ahead and get to the ending, because seeing me pick up each person and getting the little backstory and seeing the environment. So all this stuff is going in. So we're going for a smooth ride, and then all hell breaks loose and we've got vampires and, swirling, ancestors in the pool of music and this beacon that's being calling out this vampire, and he's all this stuff. And then it's just like, okay, you got to make it through the night, basically. And it'd be an interesting vampire movie for them to not do anything and wait for them to leave during the day and go on about their lives.
Right.
The end. Huh? Okay, so they show the vampires outside the door taunting them, and then they stay in the house. That's like with the blackness.
Is everything okay?
Ranger White? Is that you?
In the flesh.
Is this good or bad?
Wait, how do we know we can trust him?
I'm one of the good ones.
Oh, that does not help. They all say that.
That actually makes you seem more suspicious.
You can trust me. Seriously, if I got an invite to the cookout, I'd be honored, but I wouldn't go.
And why not?
Because I know my presence in that all-black space would be a disturbance, and undo it being an all-black space.
That's a pretty good answer.
Worse me. Okay, great. Look, I've never been so happy to see a white savior. Somebody's trying to kill us. Please help us, please.
Whoa, slow down.
A mass killer is after us and 2 of our friends are dead.
What do you mean, dead?
Dead. Meet your maker, dead.
Where are the rest of your friends?
We split up.
You split up, but you're all black.
Whoa, do not get comfortable.
I know you didn't.
Oh, move, bro.
Sorry.
If it would have went the way it was supposed to, it would be a movie. It's like, and even in the blackness, when they did the quote unquote black way of handling that guy, more of them did live because they did the black way, but it wasn't like nobody got hurt, because in a movie, those are the things that have to happen in that type of movie. And so, like I said, did it seem like it was abrupt? Yes, it did to me too. It did. But I know that what else you gonna do? Like the building was gonna actually have to burn down and they run in, or somebody's gonna slip and say something wrong, or they're gonna invite the wrong person in. It's gonna have to be somebody. It's gonna have to be something for that to happen, because I've never seen like a vampire, and it would have been the first, that they just waited them out for the sun to come out and then the end. They were just outside the door talking and going back and forth. Sun comes out, they go high, and then the end.
Yeah.
Without any kind of confrontation that they had to start staking them or using holy water or garlic or something. So.
Yeah, because then it would have to be, what do we do when the sun comes up?
Yeah.
Yeah, what's next?
It would still be a standoff, and they still have to engage regardless. And still somebody, and it might not have been Grace who said it. It'd been probably somebody else who would have let them in on accident. Or the vampire's like, we're not gonna keep waiting. We'll just burn them out the house. They'll come running out. We'll just take them out as they come out. It would have been something, I don't know. Somebody would have put a chain around the barn and drove a tractor and pulled it apart. Something. They were getting in.
Right.
They were going to have that engagement. They were going to have that physical engagement, because in vampire movies, you got to fight them. You got to stake them. You got to put the cross on them. You got to use the holy water. You got to something.
Okay. Now I get it. I mean, I get it, but
there could be other ways to do it. But like I said, that's just the way he chose. And I'm not saying it was clean or perfect, because for me, I got confused when I first saw it. I was thinking, like, when the vampires came in, I'm like, where are all these other people coming from? Because we only saw like 5, and I saw more than 5 people die. And I'm like, people dying. But when I watched it again, I saw other people there. And I was talking with a friend. I was like, Well, those are probably the people that was working there. 'Cause at the very end, you saw the people that came on the trucks and stuff, right? That was cooking the food and setting up
Yeah.
and stuff. Those people were still in the barn. They sent home the people who were dancing and paid, but all the other people, they were still there. And you could see them kind of like in the outskirts. You know, when the garlic was going to Pearline, when it was her
Yeah.
turn, and she's acting like she
Yeah.
didn't want to take her turn.
Yeah.
There was another actor who wasn't speaking that was
Yeah.
handing her the garlic that
Exactly.
he didn't have. They didn't show his turn of taking and eating it. They just showed he was chewing and him handing it to her, but he didn't have a
Right.
speaking role. So it was like other people that was in there, just like the guy who we thought was bitten. He was there too, that was passed out and drunk, and they drug him out because they didn't know. They thought that he was going to
But
turn.
he got though.
Yeah, but I'm just
Outside.
saying.
Yeah.
But I'm saying, I
Mhm.
first I only thought it was just the main characters in there.
Right.
But then they
Right.
even saw him that was in there too. And I was like, oh, there's another person in there. And I started seeing, when I watched it again, I saw more people in the background. They just wasn't speaking. And I wish Ryan would have had them have a little bit more interaction,
Like a
because
circle or
the way they did it, it almost
Mhm.
felt like we only had 5 people left. Unless
That's
you really,
exactly
unless you were paying attention, you wouldn't have thought nothing
right.
about background people who wasn't really saying anything.
I definitely thought that. Like,
Yeah.
I'm a little confused. There's
Right.
like 100 people in here
Right.
fighting these vampires,
Right. But
and there's only 5 main characters or whatever left.
right,
You know
right.
what I
But those are
mean?
the
So,
people
like,
that
I
was
wasn't
setting up and
confused
stuff
about
and
that.
cooking the food and
Yeah.
working in the background, working with the casino tables and stuff. So there were more people in there. And but like I
Yeah.
said, the way it was shot, it didn't feel like you was just those 5.
And it does make sense because when they were leaving, those were the folks that were
Yeah,
you know, the
yeah.
people who came to party. You could tell
Right.
that when they were walking out, but you didn't see the service people, like you
And,
said.
and then at the
Yeah.
very, very end, when you saw when they were talking, he was asking, "What was your favorite day?" And he said, "The last day I saw my brother, and the last
Mhm.
day I felt free, and the last day
Right.
I saw the sun." Right.
Uh-huh.
And so during that montage of him thinking back, you saw all the people that was in the truck that was coming to help out, and they were setting up, and Bo was tasting the fish, and the fish was hot, and he was
Mhm.
cooking it, and he showed all the people back there working in the spot for the people. It's like, oh, all those people, who got that truck, those are the people that was still there with them.
Mhm. Mhm.
Because they wouldn't have left,
Right.
because they would be cleaning up and putting stuff together. They still got to get paid,
Right.
not just cornbread.
That was crazy.
Their little short, little dinosaur arm. My money?
T-Rex.
My money, please?
There have been some like little funny little reels where they're like, this is how he would have been getting their money. They're just like tossing it, like, throwing it.
Put it on a little grabber. Here you go. Put it on a serving plate. Put it on a pan.
Exactly. All of
Go ahead,
that.
take it out. Go ahead, take it out. Yeah, but it had to happen the way it happened. He had to stick his
Yeah.
arm out so it get pulled out, and then it was just like, yeah, it was a trip. It was a trip.
Yeah.
It was
Yeah.
fun, like I said, but I definitely got more out of it the more I watched it. And it was just interesting too, the final part where you had Smoke accepting the situation. He know these guys are coming because Remick told him. So he's waiting for him to cross that line. And he gave him the heads up. Hey, you come back here again, cross this line, you're going to have a problem. And so doing what they do walk up. And it's funny because I was talking to one of my boys about it, Dante. I'm not sure if he saw it somewhere or he was just thinking about it, but he had mentioned like how, when he went to the barn and the barn was locked and he couldn't get in, and then Smoke starts sniping him. Because at the time we wouldn't have known, but he was saying that could have been because his brother Stack could have still been in the barn the whole time.
Yeah. Yeah.
And he was protecting his brother, because they would have
Mhm.
gotten there and found him.
Mhm.
It might have been a problem.
Mhm.
So his
Mhm.
last hoorah was to protect his brother. He was
Right.
still there, because later on we found out that he didn't kill him, and then Annie ran off on her own.
Right.
So they
Right.
both kind of got away, but differently. And so he was
Mhm.
kind of protecting his brother one last time, told Sammy to
Mhm.
go, and he's going to handle the things here, because like I said,
Mhm.
otherwise I don't think those barn doors would have been locked.
Yeah, that's interesting because he could have just left. He
Mhm.
could have just called it, I know they're coming, so let me get out
Right.
of town,
Right.
and taken his cousin and went about his business. So yeah,
Yeah.
that is a good analogy of it,
Protect
that
his
he
brother
was
one
in
last
there.
time.
Yeah. Does and to speak to that, I do like the fact that there was a history of their closeness and their love. I think we had talked about it before,
Yeah.
to show that from the very beginning of how close they were. And somebody was saying, like, the cigarette passing, they didn't exchange words, they just passed the cigarette. Like, they
Yeah.
just knew, here you go.
Don't need a
Here.
lot of talking.
Yeah. And when they went to the truck and, he told Sammy, watch him. And he said, love you. I enjoyed that.
Me too.
We discussed that before, showing men,
Right.
being affectionate towards each other, not only just the brothers, but the cousin too. He was like their little
Yeah.
brother. He was
Yeah.
beyond like a cousin.
Yeah.
And so when you find out the backstory, when he's like, "Oh, did you kill your dad?" Because remember when they picked him up, they were like, "How's Unc doing?"
Right.
"Oh, he's fine." "Is he beating on you?"
Yeah, he put his hands on y'all.
"Yeah, is he doing it?" "No." "Okay, well, he's always been a good man."
Yeah. He's been good. Yeah. Unlike their father. But he's almost like, do I need to handle something for you? He said, no, mom usually deals out the spankings and
This
stuff.
one,
And he's
yeah.
like, oh, okay. Yeah, that was funny.
They were prepared for the complexity of being, and here I go back to my disclaimer of speaking to that era that they were in. They were prepared to deal with the complexities of, their father was a different story. As we know, as Black folks, there's a lot of pressure on us.
Yeah.
There's a lot of things that we can't control. And it could turn a good person into a bad person just
Right.
because of the stress that they feel. So even though that man was a preacher, even though that man was their uncle, their father's brother, they still respected him. Hey, we'll have him back in,
Right.
good, shape or whatever. But they were prepared for that man on the outside to be a good person, and for them to say, but is he beating on you?
Right. Just, because like I said, they know his brother, who was their father, because they even
Right.
came up again when he was with Stack and he was saying, hey, you told me when I was older, you're going to tell me the story what happened to your dad. Did y'all kill y'all dad? And he
Right.
was like, no, Smoke did.
Y'all.
He
Ain't
was
no
Smoke
y'all
did. I
in
was like,
this.
that's so funny. It's so crazy. Oh no, Smoke did.
Yeah.
He said, yeah, because he would beat me and stuff like that. And said by the time I woke up, he was half burying him. Yeah, he used to beat me, but he didn't mean it. You didn't mean it. And I was like, oh, that's so heavy. That's so
Well,
heavy.
the mother died in childbirth.
Yeah,
And the
exactly.
father blamed him because he
Exactly.
was the last one to come out.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
that's why he got it the most,
Right. And we didn't find out until later, until Mary was talking to
Yeah.
Sammy in the bar when he was talking about my mom delivered them and also, practically raised them. And I also thought it was pretty cool too when Mary got upset at Smoke and was saying like, you have enough money to buy this place and get all this liquor and stuff and not even send my mama flowers. And he was like, yeah, we sent her flowers when she was alive to enjoy them. And I
Yeah.
was like, oh, that was so dope. And I'm like,
Yeah, it was.
that's like with Malaya and my lady, I'm like, you know what? I give them flowers all the time.
Right.
Just because.
Right.
It's almost like it'd be weird for me to give them flowers on Valentine's Day or birthday or something because I do it all the time. My dad was like that. And that's how he taught me. So I did the same. And so, all this, you do people right while they're there. All this, after they're passed and all this other kind of stuff, and you want to give all the kudos and flowers. No, give it to them while they're breathing. And when he said that, I'm like, yeah, that's right. That's what I do too. They know how I moved without announcing I'm doing this, announcing. No, you just do the right thing when you're supposed to. Like they didn't need to show up for a funeral to somebody who was gone. They were there when they were alive and still found a way to do it. And I like that he checked about that. I ain't worried about how it looked. I'm talking about what counted. And I love that was said.
Yeah. I like the fact that he infused like that modernism in it, because that's what we say, give people their flowers, while they're still here.
Right.
And he said just that when he mentioned it to her, didn't miss a beat. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah, give too much, you could smell them.
I mean, they were affected.
Yeah.
When they found out, that she had passed, obviously there was a little sinking look, like, oh, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But again,
that was Stack was the one that kind of got on him about that.
Yeah.
And he still trying to save face, like, yeah, well, if I'm going to hell, I'm saving you a space. You going with me.
Right, exactly. Because he was still trying to push her away. He knew that was the aspect of love that we talk about is a surfacey thing when we look at it, because we see it with the brothers. So we could talk about love with them all day. They loved each other, and like the love that was going on between these men, and the love that they showed for the community, but the love that they showed for these women to leave them for whatever reason.
Love of sacrifice. Sacrifice is a form of love.
Right. you know, to leave because they didn't think being adjacent to them was good. You know what I mean? You know, I left you because I needed to move on. You know, the other one, like, hey, you know, I set you up with this man over here.
Right.
I didn't just leave, I set you
You
up.
got a good
But
life.
he said, if you think that if somebody messes with you, that me and my brother won't kill them. I was like, what?
I believe that.
He was like, you better get her out of here or else. You know what I mean? But and that was earlier in the film when the brother was like, you need to get her out of here. Like, I'm not
He
playing.
knew from the beginning that that's bad news. He didn't know how, but he just knew.
Spun it around and said, me and my brother would kill them.
I believe that.
We would kill him. Even though he wanted you to move, you know, out of this
Yeah.
space, we would just kill him. You know,
But-
we would go crazy. We'd just kill him.
But it would put them in a situation. It's almost like I would do anything, but don't make me have to be in that situation.
Right.
You know, because we've seen plenty of times where, you know, you have moms and girlfriends and stuff putting their men and boyfriends stuff in situations for some pettiness and getting them taken out off of some ego. Now the guy knows back off because we don't know the situation and they want to run forward, kind of like Grace. It's just like we read rooms differently. And the woman kind of pulling you into this situation. So he knows what a lot of people don't know today. Sometimes it escalates really quickly. It could be a problem real fast. And certain things, the best thing is just not to engage. And if he knows there could be some drama or some mistaken thing where she looks wide enough where somebody might see it, because they even ran down about how it could look like you know, looked at her wrong, or look like you know, dancing too close to this white woman, or looked at her crazy, and somebody go run and tell somebody else. But Smoke was always the big picture guy who saw everything, you know, even though his brother accused him of not having an imagination. He has vision and imagination, but his is the chessboard. Yours is checkers. Yours is going to get him killed. Or yourself killed. And he, you know, and you have the luxury of having somebody who's thinking enough ahead to pull you in when you need it. You know, like you propel things because you got this energy and you got this vision, and you got this quick thing to make stuff happen. But he's like the long game. Okay, you made this chaos, but I could frame it up real nice for you and make it presentable where it could be art versus just a hot mess. You know, I'm taking that scattered beef and making it into, you know, into spaghetti so we can all eat from it. Okay. And so that's the kind of relationship that works until it don't work. And then it's a problem. So, because I was also wondering, like, what did she do to them? The reason why he just don't fool for like that. And you know, they grew up together and he just don't have no love. Not that he hates her, but he just knows that she's a problem. And I'm just like, I wonder what that story is. He just ain't playing. Like he's, you know, they're very cut with her. Very like, hi, bye, go.
Yeah, but that complexity in it was like the levels of it was like they both came back there. They both had women they loved, right? One of them was married, you know, the other one wasn't. So like the fact that they came back there and reconnected with them, like I don't think one loved their lady more than the other one did. They equally loved them, you know. But I think what Smoke's concern was her hue and what that could cause, like you said. Like there could be trouble just because of who she's, you know, what she looks like you said, you know what I mean? And like, you know, and the trouble could be her man coming to look for her. Even though she's been on a train, he could have been like, you should have been home by 2:00 the day before. I'm sending the people in town to go look for you. And like you said, they come to the door. What is she doing in there? Are you being held against your will? Blah, blah, blah. You know,
because Stack even mentioned to her, how you know they ain't from Arkansas? Because they're not. I know they're not. You know, because he's always looking around the corner like, they could say, saw you in here and ran back and go tell them come back. Yeah, they knew what was up. This movie was dope.
I'm equating it a little bit to this plantation burning thing. A little bit.
Go for it. For context, you know, kind of give a quick thing of what, you know.
Okay, right. I'm just talking about it like everybody just knows. Just the fact that this plantation burned down in, was it Louisiana recently? And they don't know how it happens, but the history of it is horrendous. You know, a sugarcane farm. You know, they were saying that, you know, this man came from, I think he came from Virginia and wound up, you know, moving there, and everybody was, you know, doing cotton, and he was like, I can make more money doing the sugarcane. And so he brought these slaves, and they said the history of it is that it was horrendous. Obviously it's horrendous for slaves, but it was horrendous because they worked them so hard that they didn't last more than 7 years. they cut the sugar cane with machetes, and they had to get it stacked up and ready quickly because it would rot. And then they had to boil it, to produce it, to make it into, sugar.
Right.
And so that was another entity of like, them being around that space, like boiling water and being injured and stuff like that. And how big this plantation was, and going forward in history, how people are, oh yeah, let's have a wedding here, and turn it into a resort.
Airbnb.
I saw a little footage of this woman doing like a tour guide. Ugh, I don't know how I got through that, but she was just like, yeah, we had a large amount of slaves and they were treated well. If he found out they had a family, he would just buy the whole family to keep them all together, because that's the kind of person this was modern day. That's the kind of person he was. He wanted to keep the families together, and they would have their own cabin, and they were treated well. And I was like, and then they showed this Black lady walk past her like, this is some BS. You know what I mean?
The truth had to get in there some kind of way.
Right. And the people in the comments were just like, yeah, that sister is just like, I'm out of here. You know what I mean? She just kind of walked off. And this woman had the costume on, like she was from those times and stuff. And she was just like, yeah, it was bad. It was bad. But he treated them well, and they got to stay with their families. I'm like, they were his property. That was property. That's all that was. And it was inherited. You know what I mean? He left. When the Civil War was going on, he was like, I'm out of here. He packed up 200 slaves and took them to Texas, left his wife and his kids behind. And then she eventually like sold it, but he took 200 slaves with him to Texas. So, the fact that she made the comment about, if they had families, they were able to stay together, and for real, this is your job. This is what you do. You have to believe it in order to relay that information to the visitors here. You have to believe that.
Yeah.
This isn't just a job. You have to believe in the theory of all of that to make it okay.
Right. He was a passionate pimp. Still pimping though, but okay.
Right.
But he's passionate. He cared though.
Right.
Yeah, I remember seeing a thing where they were saying how it was interesting how it looked kind of like the White House.
Yeah, I've heard that too. I've heard that.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, the fact that it existed this long, and I saw one thing, and I don't know if it's true, but it was just kind of a little funny. They were like, yeah, it burned down. It was burning, and then they put it out, and 3 hours later it started up again. And they show like the ancestors with matches and teacups, like watching it burn. And stuff. Like, thank God nobody was hurt, or harmed. One of the things that she said is, and some of the descendants of the slave work here to this day. I was like, what?
People be so delusional that they think they're giving compliments or saying something good, and it's just like, you are so off point that you don't even know it, but believe what they're saying.
Yeah, I mean,
as far as them, how they feel about that thing, like,
right, because the script is a script, right? And everybody has a script for work, and so, even if it's just answering the phone, it's still a script, right? But you have to believe it in order to relay that in a manner that's convincing, because people pay money to come here for this. So the empathy that she had was not there. It was just reporting. You know what I mean? Well, this is what they did back then, and they took care of them. Like, they were fortunate to be at this plantation.
And that goes back to what I was saying about other people's narratives for stuff. And that becomes what the truth is. And we have to, like me and you right now, hearing that and kind of like, okay, that's what she's saying.
Right.
We're not going to stay with that. We're going to either know already or dig to find out what's the true situation. Because that's how stuff happens with movies, with entertainment, with the news, with all that stuff. We got to start chewing our own food instead of letting somebody else do the chewing, and we accept it like it's good for us. And that didn't just happen out of nowhere.
Yeah, that's for sure. That is one thing that's for sure. We don't know how it happened. It's going to be interesting to find out how it happened. I think what would be really interesting if it was like, oh, it's an electrical fire or something like that. Like, really?
Right. Well, if that's the answer, it's because they're afraid to what it would mean.
Right. It's time.
Yeah.
Right.
So, did you have any final thoughts on the movie Sinners
Trying to
overall?
run through it. We talked about the women, which is
Yeah.
great.
Talked about the brothers.
Yeah.
It's funny how all this stuff came up at the end, and we kind of talked about other like key points, which I thought was really beautiful discussion. And then
Mhm.
all the stuff that people kind of go to first, we discuss kind of on the end, which is kind of cool.
Yeah.
I think that
Yeah.
says a lot. That just says how much is really in here, and not just the outside dressing is not just the only thing. That there's more to it than that. And you can have a whole conversation without even touching on the brilliance of Michael B. Jordan and all the other actors and stuff like that, and still have a great conversation that really speaks to the movie that was told.
Well, I think that like, we talk about Sammy on the surface. I don't know if there's more depth to talk about Sammy. I don't know if it's because we look at him as being young. That's kind of the role he played. I did like the fact that he said, I'm not as young, with that bassy voice. It was
Yeah,
kind of like, is this a grown man or a young, you know what I mean?
yeah.
I do like that he was kind of a little complex in that sense. You know what I mean? It was
Yeah,
almost like I said before, it was like a rite of passage
yeah.
story. You know what I
Different
mean?
coming of age, definitely. Yeah,
Yeah. And I don't mind the fact that he looks young, but he had that bassy voice and he
yeah,
was, he had this talent in being a performer, and
yeah.
the fact that he looks young and he got that grown married woman, you know
Right,
what I mean?
right. Because he is supposed to be a kid with a grown voice, but also kind of speak to society and how they look at black boys as being older than
Yeah,
they are. Because really,
yeah,
he was a kid in grown folks' business. Like
right,
none of that. He shouldn't have been in no bar, and you shouldn't have been drinking. You shouldn't have been, a whole bunch of stuff, And so it speaks to current times and how our boys are treated, not for the children that they are, but as adults.
right. Yeah, because even when he was finished from work and that lady was like, "Where you going?
Hmm.
Where you gonna be at tonight?" And he was like, "See you at church." You know what I
Right.
mean? Like
Hmm.
you don't crap where you eat. You know
Right.
what I
Right.
mean? Like, nah, we're
Right.
not
Right.
mixing that up right now.
Yeah,
You know what I'm saying?
my daddy. I don't want to hear no. I need to make it there. I'm trying to, I got plans. I heard
Right,
on the rumors that you're gonna be performing somewhere. So okay, I guess I'm gonna have to listen to the rumors and find out myself.
right. Yeah,
Have a
I
good
thought,
evening, Miss Blah blah blah.
I can't wait to see what he does next because he was just so great in this. He just did really well. He worked well with the other actors. It
Hmm.
wasn't anything new about him. You know what I
No.
mean? He played his role well, and I felt like I got a sense of like everybody in that film not only enjoyed. I had an opportunity twice to work on like as an extra, and so those days can be long. It's like sit around and do nothing. Hurry up and wait. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? And I've had a opportunity to do some production work, as well. And it's all the same. Hurry up and wait. Hurry up.
Right.
You got to be dressed and ready. So they could be sitting around for hours just waiting just to do a scene that's going to be like 10 minutes. You
Right.
know what I mean? So like, but it felt like everybody kind of gained something from that. Like everybody, it wasn't just like a film that it was history in the making. Like they knew it at the time. Like, oh,
Right.
this is this is going to be big. This is going to be really something big. And I feel like all of them got that, out of that. When we talk about Michael B. Jordan, and I heard him say in an interview, like, yeah, when I kind of heard about it or read it, I was kind of like, and I don't watch horror movies because
Hmm.
I get scared. And I was like, and that's why we like you. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like
Right.
the fact that he said like that's not usually my thing, but I was rolling with my boy here. You know what
Yeah.
I mean? I was trusting he knew what he was bringing about, and I wanted to be a part of that.
He got the performance.
He did, but I just think he was just. When I think about the fact that I didn't even think that that was one person playing those two roles from
Right.
the very beginning. I
Right.
knew there was only one Michael B. Jordan, but not in that film.
No, not at
You
all.
know, and we could talk about Oscar season in the sense of like it's too early for that. you know, I wonder if they could re-release it, you know, around that time as a reminder. Do you think it's Oscar worthy?
I think it is, but usually movies like this, they don't let in. And then also, normally, I'm grateful that it's having the success that it is. I'm almost surprised. Like, not only the critics, but the people. And I'm not talking about just black folks. Everybody is really digging this movie. I'm shocked. It's so deserved, but usually that's not how it plays out, right? And so I don't know. I hope so. At first I thought, nah, they wouldn't, but now it could be possible. We're talking about a black dude that owns the rights to this thing, who wrote and directed. It's his own property in a way. He's just loaning it out and he get it back after 25 years. And like I say, gets the upfront money and stuff like that. Like wouldn't they be afraid to give any kind of kudos to a movie like this and for it to be example for other people to do it? I don't know. I don't know how they would treat it. I would think that they would try to reject it because they don't want it to work. They don't want this to win because this is almost without them. And so I don't know. Does it deserve it? Yes. Will they treat it correctly? I don't know. How they normally treat black folks.
Well, there's always Malcolm X, right? There's always that. Always Malcolm X. That's always going to be part of, you know.
But, you know, it got to be too big to deny. And who knows? And sometimes he still denies stuff. There's a lot of stuff we should have got stuff for, we didn't get stuff for. So I don't know. Are we dealing with Remick or are we dealing with the Klan? I don't know.
Well, I think the thing about it is that we have adapted to not expecting those things. I think Spike Lee got us used to that. I mean, he's made statements like, I don't make films for that. You know, I make films for me.
He's still independent filmmaker, which is crazy. He's still got to hustle for money. When you got other people, the studios adopt them and you can make any mess they want and they'll put it out every year and they have a home. They have a studio home. Like Spike without a studio home. What? As much money as he made for people and still made it for us, but he made it for everybody. That's sick.
Right.
But that's what we're dealing with. So I don't know how that same system who's done Spike like this will be open. I will say that Ryan is very savvy on how he moves with this, how he won't get stuck in saying stuff, he won't mention race, and he's basically saying let the art speak for itself, which is wise. I think that's very very good on him. And the reason why I know that that was a thing on purpose not to really speak to race and themes that's happening in the movie is instead of just pretty much saying it's a straightforward vampire movie, is that he had his interview with this woman. She's British. I think she's from India and British. And she was asking some questions and hitting some stuff that spoke to what was going on in the movie that he technically can't say. He could say what he wants to, but he would pay the price for it. And so she mentioned some stuff about Marxism and other kind of stuff.
I feel like you've got, I want to say it's like the first actual Marxist vampire movie because it feels what you're trying to do there.
And he's like,
you know where I'm from?
No,
I'm from Auckland.
Auckland, okay.
And she was like, oh, okay. And he's like, well, coming from a place like that, you know, I'm aware of things. And so, but you using words like Marxism and stuff like I can't, you know, you watch it and you see what you see, you know, you're very insightful, but I can't. Right. And it was so funny because she said something about it being how, you know, the revolution of the underclass and this. And he just kind of like looked at her. He kind of leaned over and was like,
Zish.
And you heard the assistant saying in the background,
she walked away.
And he was like,
fuck.
And then the assistant said,
what do you need?
Help.
Right.
And he was just like, he told the interviewer, he's like,
I'm loving talking to you.
I like talking with you. You know, but I don't feel comfortable speaking to what you're talking to at this point. I was just like, that's so funny. And you know, and maybe because she's British, but she didn't read the room. Like you can't just, he already got away with something in a way. You know what I mean? He can't be saying, you can't do no, you know, Goldfield dance, you know, just he's taking his win and trying to walk away quietly.
And move on to the next
Move on to the thing. Right. He ain't trying to burn the bridge. He ain't trying to blow up the spot. And it was just so funny how, you know, people with their freedoms and their perspectives and stuff, like it don't lend to us in the same way.
Right.
You know, because I think even if I was to interview him and I noticed stuff, it's certain stuff I want to say to him because I know that he can't give me an answer.
Right.
Like we don't have to give each other the high five. Like, hey, did you catch that? We'll just give each other a look and be like,
Yeah.
And then we know when to have the conversations about, you know, what happened. But in the moment, you don't just like, you know, you know.
But I mean, if it kind of goes to, what you were, talking about, like when you're when you made that film for the purpose or the reason that you made it, then you don't have to justify anything to
No,
anybody about
no,
it. You know what I mean?
yeah,
That's not why I made it. I didn't make it for
yeah.
that purpose. It's for this purpose.
But that do come, it does come with the job. I'm just saying he made this art in a way where people caught on to it. And I think he didn't expect for people to catch on to it. I'm surprised the amount of different folks who catches on to it. I'm shocked. I'm shocked because I thought it could have easily been Checkers in a simple vampire movie and people would have left it alone and it would have been for others to kind of discuss behind the scenes all the layers of it. But I'm seeing a lot of people, catching a lot of stuff and having discussion. And not necessarily in a bad way, but I'm just surprised of who's catching what and how it's coming up. And so, granted, he put a movie out that's a personal movie, right? And it's more levels to it. So you should be able to talk about the art that you put out. But he's in a weird situation where it's almost like I'm still in somebody else's house. And I just don't go in the fridge like that. Like they let me cook the meal here, but I'm still in somebody's house. I don't take it that I could just go into any room I want to go into. I don't go into stuff and touch stuff that they didn't say I could touch. And so we're
Mhm.
still in here. And it's like your friends saying, like, hey, so how come you don't just go in the other room? It's like, this ain't my I don't feel
Yeah.
you know, I'm using their stove. I can't really, I still want to cook here again. I don't want to just talk about
Mhm.
how they're not clean or I don't like their oven. They should have used the new one instead of electric. They should have used the gas one. What do you want me to tell them?
Right.
What? You know, but somebody
Well,
else would know, like, hey, you just kind of like, good job, man. And then behind the scenes, we be talking about, yeah, man, that would have been better to have a gas stove. Yeah, man, I know. But you don't be in
yeah.
their house talking that mess. You can't do it. Just like when
Mhm.
when he was on Democracy Now, and Amy had asked him about, like they brought the fact that people get mad about his deal that he had about getting the rights back after 25 years and about
Mhm.
him getting money up front, and he's asking like, did anybody else get a deal like this? He's like, I don't know why they're getting mad. This is not the first time they gave this deal. They did the same thing
Mhm.
for Quentin Tarantino, and I don't know
Mhm.
why. And Amy was her smart butt, but she wasn't being messy because she's down. But she was
Right.
like, so what do you think that is? And he
And
started
they had a
he
singing
started
contest.
laughing. He started laughing. He said, I don't know. And she said, you want to guess?
Come on, give me something.
you know, what does it look like for him to say like people are racist? When a white guy's doing it, y'all don't say nothing. You think he did a good job. And if I'm black and doing it, you saying I've got away with something. He can't say that. He can say that, but he can't say that. And
Yeah, but
so,
I think the thing that's so great about you, talking about this to that extent is the fact that, like, when you talk about how we move as a people, you know what I mean, that we can be impulsive sometimes, in the way that we, strike out, you know what I mean,
right,
and sometimes we can take time to process. But I'm saying we're all different people and we process things differently. And I
right,
think, with what you're saying that's so good is that he's like, I'm trying to do more. You know what I'm
right,
saying? Like,
right,
this is not my last film. I know
right,
what I'm doing. You know what I mean? A lot of people
right,
have had the opportunity that I've had, and they've lived in these moments and they've been so proud and they've talked about every single thing.
right,
And then you don't hear from them anymore. You
right,
know what I mean? Or you don't hear from them on the level that I'm at right now. Like,
right,
this isn't just for me.
right,
I have a lot of people in my back. I got my family.
right,
I got my people.
right,
I got, other filmmakers who are looking at me to carve away, and
right,
that might not necessarily just be black filmmakers. It could be independent filmmakers who are like, I
right,
want to make that leap into where you are. So, like,
right.
no, we're not just going to
Yeah.
talk about everything.
And people see it as a celebration and a victory, which it is, but then it's also a tightrope, and he knows that,
Mhm.
and we know that. And like I said, I think the reason why I really connect to this and understand is because, like, when I was going and showing art and stuff, I think I found a fine line with my work where a lot of different people, even though it's black themed, coming from a black person, it was kind of like in a spot where it could be appreciated by a lot of different folks, which I'm proud of. It wasn't on purpose, but it just kind of worked like that sometimes. And then it'd be like somebody might surfacely see something in it, and I'm like, okay, yeah, that's it. And then and sometimes people like you will come up, you get this insight, and I'm like, ugh. Like, like I don't necessarily want to have this conversation, but you're not wrong. So him screaming for his lady for help, I've been there where it's just kind of like, this is not the spot to have this kind of conversation. I'm already kind of getting away with it in a way without having to go down a certain road. And it's just funny. But like I said, you, some of my work you have brought up, and I'm like, and even if it's not even about like people necessarily knowing, but it might have been something I would have thought that I did in a way where it wouldn't be so obvious. And you might just go and see it and be straight to it and be like, oh, this is that. And I'm like, what? I thought I put enough layers on top of it, or I thought I covered it up, or I thought it was ambiguous enough where it could just more leaning this way than that way. And you could just say something and be like, but then my art, or art in general, or me. And so it's this extra insight that I can't get away with somebody not feeling comfortable asking me what they want to ask me. And they'll just kind of see me and be like, that's interesting. And I'm like, yeah, it is. And that's good enough. And they won't ask another level. Or, but it's the same thing with the black women or the women in general feel comfortable with the dude to say something and he's not blowing them off like everybody else. Everybody else be afraid to say something, but them, he just kind of gotta like swallow it or be like, can we have this conversation later? Or like off to the side or something like that. Or like, yeah, bust it. Okay, yeah, that's what it is. And so, just the accountability to women in a certain kind of way with certain kind of things. So that's how I kind of took it. And it's women that was hitting them up in this way. And that was kind of like, like part of it because they wasn't black and part of it because they were women, but it was a combination of two. But like I said, I related to the part of certain people be able to read certain things in a certain kind of way, and it presents a bigger conversation that you might not want to have. And like I said, sometimes something that could be obvious in a way, but could fall in a way where it doesn't harm. Like I did a piece called Stars and Bars, and even though it's kind of deliberate what it is and how it looks, it's like a black face with a flag kind of embedded over the face in a certain kind of way, and it's laid a kind of certain way. And so I had white folks that looked at it and was like, oh, this is deep, and they liked it and they had their interpretation. And then, I had black folks that kind of saw it a certain kind of way or whatever, and certain people that just kind of said a whole bunch of extra stuff that was in it that would be a deeper conversation, and it probably wouldn't be a pretty conversation as clean as black people with Society of America on them. That's a conversation. That's the beginning and end, and okay, versus all the other stuff and all the other ways that might be a longer conversation that might dive into parts that is not so clear or not so streamlined.
Yeah.
That would take more.
Yeah, I get that. I've seen a couple of her interviews that she's done with other folks. And so the intention is definitely good. But again, I don't want to talk about that. You know what I mean? I want to keep this, line of how I've been presenting it with going down different avenues from time to time, but I still want to keep it, on the same road, right. And not do that. You could do that if you want. You can say whatever you want to say, but I'm not gonna, I'm not gonna get into that. So.
And I think that folks know not to kind of go down there. Even if we see that, we kind of know what that would mean.
And I think when you mentioned that you were surprised that people were like really, you didn't say were into it, but you kind of similar to that. Like it surprised you how the audience was. I think that like we're so used to hearing like negative stuff on a regular basis. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? And and this proves that people are looking for something good. You know what I mean? Yes. The fact that people have seen it more than once, if you could be in that good place more than once, you're going to keep going. You know what I'm saying? Right. So like, even, with me, when I saw it the first time, I was like, well, I'm going to see it again. Mm-hmm. I definitely want to see it again. And I wanted to see it on a bigger screen. I went to, Grand Lake, and that was great. I ran across a video, I think I sent it to you, where he's talking about the formats. Mm-hmm. And he's talking about all these different screens and experiences that you could have. One of them is going to be where they kind of, he says something about like, it's like a 3D experience where liquid is going to kind of hit you. He's like, it might be red, but it's not real.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
Said 4DX.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and the other ones, with the screens kind of like paralleling each
They got
other and
extra
coming.
screens on the sides that
I'm
give a
like,
little
that
bit more
film is not
information.
gonna be streaming anytime soon, you know what I mean? Like,
Right.
he made it for the theater,
Right.
and that is where it should stay as long as they can keep it,
Yeah,
you
he
know, in
made it
the
on archival paper to protect
right,
it. And like I said, I feel blessed because usually LA get all the good stuff, but I will say the rarest formats that movie is put in, we have access to two of them. And one of them is 1 out of 5. The other one's 1 out of maybe 10 or 15.
right.
And so I saw it on
You
the two
saw
that we
both of
have.
those.
Both of those had to. And
Yeah.
they definitely was different experiences. It was a trip to see the horizon, and it just kind of bowed. It was so wide, that was a trip. It was and there's also seeing certain scenes in IMAX where it was just so, the format where one was cut off and you see the frame of somebody to see the whole body,
Mhm,
like the scene where he's has the machine gun and he's shooting at the Klansman, like you see almost, you see more of his body. And then
mhm,
also when Annie's like nursing the baby, you see more of her body while she's nursing the baby because it's in IMAX, it's higher up, it
mhm.
has a more high than it is wide. And so you
Right.
see more of that frame. It feels full for certain scenes. It was just like, man, yeah. And I saw it on regular screens too, and it was just as good. But it was just like it was definitely an experience to see it in those different formats and to have somebody who did all these different ways. And I seen where he was showing like he went to go to IMAX headquarters where they do the film and stuff, and he had saw the canisters for his movies, and he was just so proud to have it stacked up there, and just all the reels. Like, yeah, these are all the pieces, and like that's almost like preparing your baby with everything they need to be all right. It's a different kind of thing. And it felt
Mhm.
like this is his kid. And even though he gave us all in those other movies he's made, and that's why we love them,
Right.
it's different for this.
Mhm.
And like I said, you didn't know what the kid was going to turn into, but he was
Yeah.
prepping for it to be the thing.
Mhm.
And thank God it turned out to be the thing.
Mhm.
He prepped correctly. You could prep and it'd be a dud. You just don't know. You don't know. You don't know.
Like I said, that generational wealth is there. You know what
Yeah.
I'm saying? Like, for I mean, I think his wife is pregnant now. I don't know if they have other kids, but
Yeah, they
like,
do.
I wonder if that thought process came in there. I feel like it had to. You know what I mean? If you're talking about you get it for 25 years and it's mine after that, that's generational. When we
Yeah.
talk about like these strategic, is on the strategic planning board, and they call it the seven generation,
Yeah.
of planning. And I'm like, 7 generations from now, like seven. I'm thinking
You're
like
talking about
one.
paycheck to paycheck, month to month.
Yeah. They're like 7, so if you look at 25 years, I'm not doing the math right now,
Right.
but there's generations within that's beyond him that he's thinking of, and beyond that 25 years, it's definitely into that 7, generations
Yeah.
of wealth.
And it's not a thing that's afforded to everybody, you know? It's almost kind of like to be able to dream and to prepare and to mill on stuff. That's a luxury that a lot of us don't have. And so even when we do little things to try to secure our legacy in the ways that we can with what we have, which a lot of times isn't a lot for many of us, I'll put this out there that as much as it is to get a lot of things, to set stuff up, to pull stuff together, to think ahead, as important that is, make sure, and this is the most important part, is that your loved ones and your family have the same mindset and mentality of the game plan. Let them know that it's a marathon, it's not a race. Let
Yeah.
them know if they don't do their part, it won't work. It won't
Yeah.
continue. Sometimes we make these elaborate plans and nobody has the rule book or the format. So they don't know.
Mhm.
They're playing checkers on that board when you already set up chess. So they're moving the rook, one step when it moves 3 up, 1 across. Like we moving stuff wrong. So you got to let them in on the plan and to let them understand what you want from them. Not they can make their own way and stuff too, and they will when they. But it's like certain things, as a family, you got to kind of agree on and lay out that track. Lay out that track so the pieces will be moved right. So they won't drop the baton and think it's no big deal. Or I don't want to do it just because, I had to be around there all my life and I'm not into making shoes. So when my dad dies, with no more shoe store. Like, what? And then you'll go get another job working for somebody else and you don't like that either? but the shoe store at least you own and you can control, or hire somebody else to make the shoes and you still own it. Like, come on, like we gotta have these conversations. We gotta tell that little boy and little girl, hey, you don't take that first deal like he did.
Right.
10 cents not enough. Ask for more. 50. I can do 20. 20 it is. Okay. You know what I mean? Just
Yeah. I think, all in all, thinking about the whole thing as far as the film, the actors, the music, we didn't even talk about that. The music, the cinematography, just all the right people were in the right places, and they weren't just doing their jobs. They did a fantastic job.
Yeah.
And if this was a resume builder, what's next? Carry that whole team to the next thing, because what they can produce.
But that's what he did, and that's how they kind of got popular now. Like all those folks he dealt with, from the music to the DP to all that kind of stuff. Those are the same folks that he brought with, Creed and the Black Panther movies and all that kind of stuff. This is the same team. He rolls with the same people. Michael B. Jordan's been in every movie he's done so far. So he's about community and family, keeping the same folks there, same producers he had, producing partner that he had since Fruitvale Station and all that kind of stuff. Like, I haven't seen a movie from him that I haven't sat after the credits roll and was just kind of stuck and had nothing to say, and you're looking at somebody next to you and everybody's crying or feeling a ways about it. From the Fruitvale Station, I remember seeing that in Emeryville and just not getting up afterwards.
Yeah.
An older white gentleman sitting next to me, tears in his eyes, and I'm choked up, and we just looking at each other like, I don't know what to say.
Right.
I don't know what to say. And there's nothing to say. Same thing with Black Panther, the pride and stuff. It's like, I don't know what to say. Ain't nothing to say. Wakanda Forever, same thing, even though it wasn't my favorite, but he had a lot to deal with to get that out. But even with the Creed stuff and the thing of legacy. That scene when Michael B. Jordan got knocked down, Adonis got knocked down, and he was knocked out, and he thought of his dad, and he popped up off that canvas like he can't go. What? Like Felicia Rashad, like, you're my son, like you can, like, I'm not gonna leave you to the system. Like, that's in a boxing movie about a white dude in Philadelphia. Like, they didn't make no sense that exists, and it came from a Rocky movie. About a character that was our champ, but he was not really the champ because it wasn't his story. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, I remember seeing on IDB when he first came out and said he's gonna do Black Panther, and he said in his thing that he had said that he was gonna do a movie called Creed. And I laughed. I was like, there had to be a typo. They can't. Creed, what do you mean? Apollo Creed is dead. And then, like, if he had a son, his son would have to be older. So what do you mean? Like, I thought it was a joke. Who would have thought? Like, that thing I was laughing at when I checked him just to see who he was and what was up with him. And that was the movie, Creed. Sometimes they had the wrong information and stuff. Like, there had to be a typo. Like, it can't be Rocky Creed. What do you mean Creed? And so, like I said, I haven't been in a movie of his that I wasn't just stuck in my seat and I had to just, like, I got to chew on this. Like, I went through so much. And that the bad guys aren't just clean-cut bad guys. Like, everybody got their perspective and roles that they play. It's just like he naturally has a thing that everybody connects with. And at the same time, giving truth without running people off.
Yeah.
Truth, people run from the truth. People reject truth, forward in your face information. Even if it's to help you out to save your life, you don't want to hear it. You could be on fire. If they don't want to believe it, they'll sit there and be like, it's not really burning. That's more of reality than the correct reaction to things. We do not react to things correctly. We wait for the alarm to go off. We don't go from the smell that we smell smoke. We wait for them to tell us that it's time to run or to move versus like, hey, this doesn't look right. Go.
Yeah.
We are lost. We walk around pretending to be alive and living. We react to stuff, but are we alive? Are we
vampires?
I
think that there's also survival. I think if generationally, culturally, we were raised on that, not that we had lack of dreams, but like what is clear is about survival. I think what I'm in awe of him is his whole background of like, you know, I watch films, I enjoyed them, you know, I went to school, you know, and, you know, I played football, you know, I applied for film school and successfully did that. That's a long list of believing in yourself. That's a long list of a to-do list, you know, where how many times would people have given up?
Right.
You know, one, because nobody's supporting it, because it's you being a filmmaker. Oh, really? That's what you're gonna do? So that's the first thing you gotta fight against, you know what I mean? Or money. Oh, I can't afford that. You know what I mean? So the fact that he kept pushing through and was successful at completing, you know, what he wanted to do as far as going to film, I mean going to film school.
Right.
And then making that first film that was impactful
Right.
with a star. People knew Michael B. Jordan on some level.
But not like that. I knew him from
Yeah.
soap operas and
Yeah. Because
TV
that's where
shows, but not like
I never watched, I probably had seen clips of it, but I never watched The Wire.
Oh, neither did I.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Been to Baltimore plenty of times, but just never watched The Wire. But I saw him on All My Children,
Mm-hmm.
you know, when I was, you know, doing my stay-at-home mom thing, and I saw him on there, and he was good.
Yeah.
He was in a family. I don't know if you know what his character was, but he was adopted by a white man.
Yeah.
And Erica came married. I forgot his name, something Montgomery.
Because I used to watch that all the time. My dad got me into soap. So one like to live,
Oh,
All My
okay.
Children, and all that stuff. I never
Yeah,
watched the CBS stuff, but all the ABC soaps I watched.
yeah. I forgot because it was two brothers,
Yeah.
and the brother that became his father was a single guy.
Mm-hmm.
He was an attorney, and I think he met him, you know, through some trouble, like he had gotten in trouble or something, because that's what we were cast as. You know
Right.
what I mean? Like,
Trouble
this is
youth.
the way you're going to break into the show. Most of the time, it was something like that, right?
Yeah.
So that's how he met him, and he was a tough kid, and he decided to take him in, and he adopted him, and then he eventually, like, Erica Kane married that brother, and he was on the show for a long time. He wasn't on there for 5 minutes. He was on there for a long time, and he was good on that show. And sometimes I think, I wonder what those soap actors are thinking about him right now. Like, who would have thought
Yeah.
that he would have gotten to this level? Definitely not because he wasn't talented, but just all the opportunities that he's had to grow, as an actor. And I didn't know the woman that plays Mary was a child actor.
Yeah. Haley Steinfeld.
Had no clue. And they were like, "Oh, she's in Pitch Perfect too." And I was like, I saw that.
Yeah.
But I didn't know that she was a child actor.
And she was in the Bumblebee movie that they filmed in Vallejo.
Mm.
And she was also into the animated Sony movie Into the Spider-Verse. And she does a voice for Gwen Stacy, Spider-Gwen.
And who was in True Grit? She was in that movie.
She was in True Grit. It was one of her first movies when she was a kid.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I didn't know anything about her. I think it was her mom is half Filipino and black, which I didn't know.
Yeah. That's one of the things that she's been speaking to about how this movie has impacted her, that she's started to have conversations with her family about that connection,
Right.
that she didn't have before. So again, and that's part of being involved in something. I'm sure when it was being filmed, it was a learning opportunity for a lot of people.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't just, doing a job. It was a learning opportunity. So
yeah, and a lot of times people know their lineage and just don't mention it because it's just like, as long as you don't say it, you're passing. So if you got a little olive complexion and nice hair, you'll fit in right in with everything else, and they just won't say anything.
Right.
So I thought it was interesting that for it to come out with this situation and stuff, I thought it was very interesting. And I wonder how will that affect her career from going forward, And it's a shame. It should be like, well, she just was in a great movie and that means good things. But sometimes, just like certain things don't mean certain things and translate right for us, they don't work and translate for them either. But I guess them is kind of us too. But, it's just like, I'm not going to go into that because it's something else.
She's going to be all right.
Yeah. I'm not worried about her, but I'm just saying, I just different how people move with blackness in Hollywood and society. It's just interesting how that goes. And that's a whole other kind of conversation and how people use that and when they're black and when they're not black, and when they lean into the, it's just interesting. But yeah, I think she did a great job, and I enjoyed her in there, and it kind of covers the situation if anybody brought it up, because it's like now you can't play anything unless you're actually that, which is crazy because you can't play everything that's made up. Like if you are alien, you're not an alien, so what are you gonna do for that? But if you're black,
Yeah.
you gotta play a black person. You white, you gotta play a white person. So if she saying that she's part black in this movie and she wasn't in real life, it was gonna be hell to pay, even though it should have been like it was. She did a great job. You know what I mean? Because that
Mm-hmm.
would have came up. So it's
Right.
almost like Ryan knew to make sure that was a thing that needed to be a requisite before even, I wonder if that's considered, because that's what people would have went for. To people's surprise, oh, that white girl there playing like she's black, and then look it up like, oh, I guess she is. And she talked about it before they got a chance to bring it up and looked, because people gonna look.
Yeah.
I thought that was very interesting, and have to think that he thought of that before, casting.
I mean, y'all didn't think she was black when she said, "Boy, you better get the F out of my face."
But that shouldn't have been a thing that they thought she was black for.
They were like, whatever percentage she
That's
had,
the
she
problem.
used it.
That shouldn't be the thing, because in a way that was kind of spoken to when Sammy was questioning if she was black, until she walked around. They were looking at her butt, and he was like, "You sure she ain't black?" So everybody got their little quotas or signifiers to be like, "Okay, are you one of us?" And that's like, those things should be the last things that we would consider somebody being black, versus behavior, mindset, and relation to culture.
Mm-hmm.
Because regardless, you could be, with your folks that's not your folks.
Mm-hmm. Right.
We better get done with this. It's starting to turn down.
There goes the day.
This is a conversation one I was expecting from us talking, and from you, and from your perspective, and just how we kind of talk with each other and stuff. So not surprised at all. It covered so much stuff.
Right.
And
We didn't
great.
even talk about Ruth Carter, the costumer, and how great she is. The fact that she is just great at what she does, an Oscar winner from the Spike Lee school, just how great she is. I've
Yeah,
been, following her for a very long time. You know, I guess I'm picturing the costuming of it now. And that was a character as well in that story too,
for
because
sure.
when we talk about the dandyism that was
Mhm.
going on at the Met Gala, you can look at that film and see it there.
I wouldn't
You
be
know, a
surprised
lot
if that inspired it. I wouldn't be surprised. Even though I'm sure takes years to get their themes and stuff together, but I wouldn't be surprised they saw that movie and was thinking like, you know what? Maybe this
well,
year.
it's from a book, but that's
Yeah.
part of it too, because there is the inside information within the industry of what's
Yeah.
like coming up and stuff like that too.
And sometimes stuff just lines up like that naturally.
Yeah.
But then sometimes, like you said, people see stuff early and it's like, oh, but like with all her work, because I was watching today her talking about the costuming she did for Black Panther, and just the details and the different Wakandans and the different tribes and what this means, and the stuff that she did by hand because she wanted to make sure it's going to be in the shot, and all this different technology and stuff. She has such a beautiful language with her work, and the different shapes and the colors and all that kind of stuff. And her and Ryan seem to be on the same page together with that kind of stuff. But it spoke so much, and the movie was so good, and Michael B. Jordan did so good, even though she had the language with the blue and red.
Yeah.
Smoke had the blue, and Stack had the red, and how everything's color coordinated and stuff, and then just the styling and all that kind of stuff. Even though it did so much work on its own, everything was on the same page to go along with it. It wasn't one was doing speaking for it and not speaking for itself. It all was in tandem. It all worked together. Because, like, say Michael B. Jordan didn't bring his A game, right? Maybe, he was just being Michael B. Jordan on this movie, and we would need the language of red and blue to separate the brothers out so we wouldn't get
Right.
confused about who was who. But who thought he was going to dig in like he did, and had a whole bunch of different personality quirks, and one have shakes, the other one don't have shakes, one smile a lot, the other one don't smile at all.
Hmm.
One is reserved and kind of clenched all the time, the other one's kind of open and wide frame. Who knew? Both of them speaking together. She
Hmm.
made the clothes, make sure the clothes matched with that. And he did the acting to make sure it matched like that. You know,
You
he
saw the difference in hats that
yeah.
Sammy had from the beginning to
Yeah,
the end credits.
one had an Irish style with the caps and stuff. Another one had the French style that with the brims and stuff like that, which was the same guys that they stole the liquor and wine from in
Yeah.
Chicago. So they had personas of the different cultures out there. So
Mhm.
so I appreciated both of them. I like both the stylings. I like the brimmed hats, and I like the paperboy hats. And I thought that
Yeah.
was all dope, and the button up and the ties and all that kind. Like I said, it was language. It was Ruth. She never misses. Yeah.
People were using the hats as a semblance for Sammy because he was wearing the brim all throughout, and at the end, when he was an older man, he wore the cap, mirroring more smoke. So, when Mary walked out with the gun, I was like, "Where's she gonna put that gun?" You know what I mean? There's like a pocket there, and you could see it. It wasn't hidden, and that was a character in itself too. It's interesting how that part had happened anyway. It was all in line with the cinematography, like that one shot that they show of the brothers looking at the sky,
Yeah.
and it's this beautiful color blue, like incredibly blue sky, and the costumes that they have on fit perfectly
Hmm.
for that scene,
Yeah.
or for even it's a movie poster,
Right.
perfectly for that. So
She made sure they was dressed for the party, and they brought it. And that's what's working with people that you know and know you, and you're on the same page with the vision that everybody knows how to lend to each other correctly. It's like any
mhm.
kind of relationship, one person offsetting the other part and making sure the other person's held up. And together, you could win. You could win. For somebody who's doing a movie on their own that they were going to try to own and try to present, you wouldn't be doing something like blues, and you wouldn't be doing something, especially modern time, and you wouldn't do anything about like no vampire movie.
Yeah.
Horror movies are usually like the easy, cheap movie that you make just to get your footing because it's easier to do
Mhm.
that than anything else. That's a lot of directors start in horror because it's just one of those kind of things. You don't have to be a great script. You just, go through the motions and you're out. And so for him to choose those things that's kind of countering what's going on today, you know. So for him to choose that thing and still bring something new to it where people connect to it. They got church folks who don't want to hear about no damn hoodoo going to go
Right.
see it. You got people who don't care about no damn blues going to
Right.
go see it. You got some folks who don't want to hear but see no stuff about no Klan stuff and they're going to go see it. Somebody don't want to see no black folks, taking out some Klan folks are going to go see it. You got some folks,
Mhm.
you know what I mean? It's all this stuff. You got people who this ain't their thing finding it to be their thing in some kind of way.
And I think the thing that's interesting about that is that I was ready for the whole backlash because of the times that we're in right now. Like, just nasty, negative stuff from
That's what I'm saying. I was
those
shocked.
sources.
Yeah,
Yes, that is the shocking
yeah.
thing from
I
because
was
we've been hearing on a daily basis all of this negative stuff. And it was like, okay, what are they going to say? I haven't heard anything.
No, that's why I thought it was crazy. That's why I didn't
Yeah.
understand. I'm proud and surprised, but
Yeah.
I was surprised they made it out this far without no issues. I just knew they
Yeah.
was gonna cut that thing out the legs. I'm like, yeah, they said he could have it because they were gonna come back the next day and take them out, just
Mhm.
like in the movie. I was like, yeah,
Right.
this. Oh yeah, you can
Grand
buy.
opening, grand close.
Grand opening, grand closing. Yeah, we'll let you in there because I've seen studios do that to movies before, like that movie about Nat Turner.
Yes. I know who you're talking about.
Yeah, but he bought that movie out, and then Fox decided to back him, which I thought, why would Fox back that movie? And then they kind of cut the legs underneath it after it came out and stuff, and the scandal came out about him and all
Yeah.
this other kind of stuff. Like, and then where happened to that movie? And sometimes people want to own something of yours so they can know when to cut it off.
Yeah.
They own it to
Yeah.
to sink it. And so you're
Mhm.
thinking like, oh, they're so open. They understand. Yeah, they understand. Like if it's a light that's going to spark something, they know how to shut it off. They know how to
Mhm.
buy it and cancel it. I know
Mhm.
that. And so I
Mhm.
thought that was very interesting. So I was kind of hoping this wasn't going to be that kind of situation. And that's why I was kind of hoping people wouldn't read into it too much, before it got too far down the line because it could possibly mean that. So when I started,
Mhm.
so the bigger I started seeing it and being big, not like I said, not just for being a vampire movie, but being big for the insight and how deep it was, I'm like, crap, not now. Do that later when it's on Blu-ray. Don't don't start saying what it is now. But it
Mhm.
seemed it still had worked, but I was afraid that they were just going to sink that thing. because like I said, they gave him a gimme. They had the empathetic white vampire, which I'm sure the studios were glad to see. Like, oh yeah, and then you had the Klan people that's normally bad, so they didn't mind seeing them in a bad light because they normally seen it as a bad light. And so I'm sure on paper it looked kind of safe, but he layered it with all this other kind of stuff. So I thought, okay, he got through the door. That's cool. As long as they don't keep picking too much, I think it'd be all right. If he could just avoid stuff, then he could just kind of get it through down the line. But people are like, oh, this is like this, and this is talking to this, and this is, I'm like, oh crap. And the folks are saying it out loud and they haven't, okay, and it kept still doing good. So I'm like, okay. But normally, nah.
Well, I think what's up front with him and much appreciated is his humility. He's very humble and very thankful and just always saying how blessed he is. And it just seems like he treats people well, number one, in the way of the crew, but also in the care that he takes in the interviews. He's not cocky.
Right.
You know what I mean? He's, like you said, if he couldn't answer the question, I don't have the answer for you. You know what I mean? But, he didn't, sometimes people will disguise that cockiness as like, well, I don't want to talk about it. Mm-hmm. Okay. Why don't you just say you don't have the answer for it? But you'll get back with him or something like that. But he doesn't represent himself that way. I love how he's always representing Oakland. Always.
Oh yeah.
Even in that the one where he's talking about format, I couldn't wait till he did the list, like you said, there in the list of 5, and then the Metreon was in the list of 10 that you went to. I'm mad I missed out on that one because that's gone.
They're talking about bringing it back though. People are demanding, so I think they're gonna bring it back for another stint.
Oh, good. Try to be on top of that when he comes back. But when he got to Grand Lake, he was just talking about all these other ones, and he got to Grand Lake and he paused and was like, yeah, this one is my heart. That's the one that I used to see all the films with my family. So yeah.
This is,
I mean, you never know, like just sitting in that theater and how grand, a little play on the word, but how grand that theater is.
Yeah.
That he sat in there as a young man, as a boy, as a young man, as an adult, and became this, this filmmaker that he is, this extraordinary filmmaker that he is. You just never know who's sitting in these seats and who's going to be at the table in the future. Yeah.
Definitely inspiring. If you got a movie in you that you need to get out and work on, you get on it.
Yeah. I mean, and I think sometimes those words people will say is easier said than done because life gets in the way and stuff. But that's why, I was talking about earlier about that to-do list that he accomplished, that he, we don't know what could have prevented it or tried to stop him, but he just kept on pushing it and got to where he is.
And 9 times out of 10, what's stopping us is us.
True.
If you're looking for an exit, you will find one.
I got to make sure I do a disclaimer. I was talking about Roseville and I said in Wall Street. I should have said Black Wall Street because there's a film that's called Wall Street. Mm-hmm. So I want to make sure that we're talking about Black Wall Street, not just or just regular Wall Street in that sense. But yeah, it was great.
Well, I'm glad you saw it a second time and it wasn't meh.
No, I mean, it wasn't meh. It wasn't meh,
I'm never deleting that message. I was like, what?
Well, the second time didn't make me change my mind. I had already changed. And I don't want to say change my mind because that would be not authentic of me to make it like little pressure and I changed my mind. I think that people have a right to have, obviously, their opinion. We all have different eyes and different perspectives. Right. You know what I mean? And I think, when I go see a movie, I'm looking at it through a lens of having a background, my little degree in film and television and stuff, and looking at it if it's something I really want to see. I have that analyzing lens on, and I think I needed to sit with it for a while to really understand, when did it become a little bit, not the whole film, but a little bit of a disconnect for me. And it was it was the end. It was the come in. I can say that, walking out the theater, I was so stunned, and that's when it was immediately after, when you and I had text. But, after just kind of sitting with it, I was like, it was the end. It was, why? Why did she say come in? What's up with Grace? But again, as we said before, I'm looking at it through a lens of like, this is my thing. I like, slave narratives and period pieces, and that's my experience. And like, I'm not looking at it as a horror film. I'm not looking at it, even though that's it. I'm pushing that aside because I closed my eyes. I didn't even see as much as you did. But for the second one, I kept my eyes open. And I was like, okay, I see everything now. I wasn't scared. So, the second one I got to see, when they were, affected by Annie being, staked. I saw when, Mary ran out in the woods. You know what I mean? There were things that I saw that I didn't because of the anxiety of it being a horror movie,
And some of that stuff happened out of order too, because when they showed her running, that was later on in a flashback of how she kind of got away. Because they didn't show it at the time when it was happening. They showed it when they were talking with him years later at the bar when they went to go see the adult Sammy. That's when they showed her running away down the road. So some of that stuff was not necessarily in the order, but yeah.
I think that's the thing about films, and I think kind of with how people kind of look at, and this isn't you, but how people kind of looked at, because I saw a few reels online where people were like, oh, that movie was terrible, and that was, and I was like, it wasn't terrible. Like, what are they talking about? You know what I mean? Like, I don't think you should get on, I mean, to each his own. It's still a free country. Right. Question mark.
Quote unquote.
But I don't think you should necessarily jump online to do something like that, but it's a free country. It's just like, things that I would not do or wouldn't invest in doing, other people do, and for me, I knew it wasn't the entire film. I needed to sit with myself and figure out for myself, why are you feeling this way? What made you, like I said, have that kind of a bit of a disconnect? And once I discovered it, I understood it for myself personally. And I think I had shared with you, it was the end. I think you said, oh, did you change your mind? I was like, which I thought was funny. I was like, I didn't dislike the film. It was just, I figured later on, it was really just the end of her telling them to come in. It just bothered me from that perspective.
Like, sometimes you might see something a certain kind of way and it's out of context and you see it again. Like I said, I could have said the music part. I saw that and it threw me off when I saw the guy playing the electric guitar. And I could be like, I didn't like that. And then I could be like, watch it again, and be like, oh, okay, that makes sense now. So you could change your mind on stuff. It's not.
I don't know if I changed my mind about Grace because I think it was the tone and the delivery with her that threw me off. Like, do something. Like the demand of her was also the disconnect. That's probably when the disconnect started for me. That like, you bossed your man around and look what happened to him. But he got bit
But he did what you said. He listened to his woman and look what happened.
Right. He did. But it was out of sequence for me and we talking about men paying attention to women or whatever. And he did exactly what I said earlier. But it was, I really love the fact that when Cornbread was like, why am I talking to you? And I was like, here it comes. Like automatically I was like, and that's an example of me saying men listening to women is from context in that sense of what happened in that piece where he was like, why am I talking to you anyway? And it was like, we've heard that before where a man can dismiss, this woman's thoughts or her talking or whatever. And the fact that none of the men said, oh, let me take care of this. You know what I mean? I got you, Annie, you ain't got to say nothing to him or don't disrespect her. And she was like, again, you talking to me. And nobody interjecting that was great for me. That everybody understood that she could hold her own and they didn't need to step in for that piece.
Yeah, I think that situation, he could have been talking to anybody who wasn't the owner of that spot. And he's like, why am I sitting here arguing with you? That's like somebody saying, why I'm talking to you for, I should be talking to the manager.
Right.
Can you give me my refund? No? Okay. Can I speak to the owner?
Yeah, but then he made it personal. It was your
yeah, because they're friends, because they know each other.
All right.
Like I said, they're arguing about fish grease.
Right.
I don't use bad fish grease.
It was funny because they got off course for a second. Like, wait a minute, we're talking about vampires.
He hit home talking about her food. I think it's your food that made my stomach sick anyway. Use that bad fish grease. I use fresh grease every time I cook fish. It's just a moment to be real. And so, like I said, so for me, I didn't take it as him being dismissive to her like that. But also, he had a different agenda too. He don't want nobody who's going to be discovering what's going on. So of course, You don't want to talk to the person who's going to be bringing up logic, no matter who it was. That could have been Sammy. He would have said, shut your little young butt up. What do you know?
Yeah.
Because he could have
Yeah.
got shut down. Just like when Delta Slim was talking about, oh, this is my cousin, Sammy. He's a blues player. You're like, oh, he's not old enough to do nothing. What do he know about the blues? So people are dismissive to people. No, I'm just saying.
He strummed like 2 chords and he's like, hey now, hey, this is my corner.
Right. But when he was talking about how he was no blues, he was quickly dismissed him, talking about like, why I'm talking to you? Well, he know about blues. So people are dismissive to people for different reasons.
Yeah.
In situations, I took it like that.
Yeah, I didn't think about the second time I went. When I analyzed the disconnect for myself, I thought about it in that moment and analyzed and understood it, and I didn't think anything else about it.
Yeah, because I don't think he was coming at her because he was like, she's a woman kind of thing. Because you already could tell that he respect women, because even when somebody's talking or cursing around his wife, he's like, hey, man, don't speak like that around my wife.
Yeah.
What I mean? That's the first thing he said. That's my wife and my family.
But it wasn't him, though. Remember, it wasn't him. It was the vampire. I mean, it was the vampire at this point. Yeah,
no, I know. But I'm just saying, I took it as a defense thing because she was going to, fill him out. So, yeah, why am I saying talking to you? And she's going to, like I said, it could be anybody saying the truth.
Right.
He didn't want that because he's trying to get in. And so she's making sense. What if she wasn't making sense? It was Sammy making sense. He would have said, shut up, young buck. Shut up when the grown folks are talking. That's how he would have handled Sammy. If Sammy was like, hey, man, how come you asking to come in here when you were already, you're bigger than me. I'm a kid. Then he would have dismissed him and shut. So I think it was just more of him shutting down the situation than anything, because we already saw where he was talking. It wasn't even, speaking to his wife, but somebody was cursing around his wife, and he was like, hey, my family's here. So it wasn't like he was just a rude dude all the time or nothing. So I didn't take it as him continuing to be dismissive or not considering a woman being around or whatnot.
But even his wife was a strong character.
Yeah, she was. Yeah,
because he was like, "Yeah, my wife is right here," and he's like, "Oh, you can do blah 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 to your wife and blah blah blah," and she's like, "How much?" You know what I mean? Like, even she was a strong character for those moments that she was in there, in that field with those few lines that she had. She's like, "We about business right now. Like, how much you talking? Go do it. We could use the money," kind of thing. So, but I really do like how he displayed the women in that film. I just really like how he paid attention and gave, respect to them and let them shine in that film. And Grace was definitely one of those characters. She was a very strong character from the beginning. But like I said, for me, it was just the tone and the delivery and the demand of it that was just like, what's happening here? I thought we were all in this together. Like, he's thinking right now. It's just so much with that. But when I saw it the second time, I didn't think anything about it. I knew what was going to happen. Right. My thoughts about her delivery didn't change. Yeah. But it was just more focused on Sammy and more focused on the end when he fell down and was rolling up the cigarette, and when his everybody's calling her wife for all of those reasons, but when she was there with the baby, I was more focused on it and the beauty of the film then. So yeah, that's right on. I'd go see it again. But if it came back to the Metreon, I would go see it, because now for me it's the film maker part of me, or the artist part of me, that's like, I want to see it bigger. I want to see it in a different way, not necessarily the dialogue and all of that anymore. So so if don't keep it a secret. Let somebody know that it's at the Metreon when it comes back. Drop a text. Okay. Say now.
Will do. Well, I thoroughly and always appreciate your insight, your wisdom, and your perspective. And that's why I like talking to you about.
I'm okay. Especially. I'm all right.
I dig you. But seriously though, like I said, I like our conversations, and I think we have great conversations together. I like how they turn out, and this would not be any different. So I'm glad to be able to add this one to our other conversations for sure.
Well, I appreciate you. Appreciate that. This seems like a 5-episode one. You got a lot of editing.
This is all I can ask for. You know what I mean? This is all I can ask for. Yeah.
Well, again, thank you for inviting me per usual, to do something that's creative and inspiring and all of that. that speaks to the artists that we are.
Right.
So I always appreciate that. I think we had talked about some other movies that we were thinking about maybe watching, but I'm only going to mention the Untold Shooting Guards. You got to watch that one.
It's on my
Gotta
list.
watch it.
Okay.
Forever, like I said the other day, will take forever to watch.
I thought it was so funny because I thought it was a movie too. And so when you said that, I'm like, really? Not that that's bad as a series, but it's just funny how you think something's gonna be one thing and it'd be like, oh, this is 8 hours.
Right. Yeah.
Versus like the standard hour and a half, hour 40. You're like, oh, 8. Oh, okay.
Right.
I got it. It's a life choice. Okay.
And it's about teenagers. So we have to go through every stage that they're going through, every emotion and all of that kind of stuff in order to watch it. So that's gonna take forever. So I don't know about that.
Okay.
I don't know about that.
We'll work it out. We'll work it out. All right. So I guess we'll end it there. So that was Jay and Sabrina talking about the movie Sinners. Ryan Coogler's Sinners. Ain't that nice? He owns it. It's his thing. It's not Marvel. It's not Disney. It's not Warner Brothers. It's not Sony. It's Ryan Coogler's.
Right.
Sinners.
Or the Cooglers, because it's the family. So I mean, it belongs to the family forever. So yeah.
Beautiful thing. Beautiful thing. Yeah. All right. Until next time, peace.
I still don't have a tagline. Maybe next time I'll have one. Right. I don't want to repeat it, but peace. How about that?
We'll take it.
All right.
All right.